Good evening, everybody. At this time, I'll call the meeting for Thursday, August 10th, 2023 to order. At this time, I'll lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Your adoption of the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Been moved in second.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make an amendment to the agenda, please.
Go ahead, Tom.
Thank you, Senor. Under ordinances and resolutions for action under 8E, I'd like to add resolution 23-1910, a resolution of the City Council of the City of Lake Forest Park, Washington, directing the administration to prepare a letter to the Washington State Department of Transportation and Sound Transit regarding reducing speed limits on State Route 522 and State Route 104 within city limits.
So basically, Tom's adding an E on number 8.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay. All those in favor of that resolution being added, say aye.
Aye.
And December, did you have something too?
Yes, I would like to add to council discussion action 9A, a letter to WSDOT and Sound Transit, and bump A to B.
Second.
Moved in second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Nays, passing unanimously. Thank you. Okay, council.
Mr. Mayor?
We've got to finish adoptive agenda. Yes, sir.
I would like to offer that we move citizen comments to just after number 3, so that they may be heard early during the discussions. Not all of our citizens wish to attend all of the items this evening. I would actually propose we make it as a matter of course.
So you want a citizen's comment to be next then?
Yes.
Okay. Anybody?
Second.
Okay, and second, all those in favor of moving 6 to 3 to 6 to 3 B, I'm gonna say, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any nays? Okay, seeing none. Okay, now are we adopting the agenda? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any nays? As amended, passes unanimously. Okay, we're gonna move on to citizens' comments.
We're gonna chicken dinner.
What we did. Okay, Vicky Scurry, welcome.
Well, hi there, and I just want to say thank you to everyone who attended the Sound Transit Community Meeting. I think it was last week or whenever it was recently, and what I wanted to say is I thought it was really great that some of our council members spoke and had really cogent things to say, as well as almost 450 community members attended. So I just wanted to say I feel really positive about how this is going with the community becoming united with the citizens and the city council to kind of push this in a direction that might be better for us. And I really want to thank Tom French for putting forward this resolution to lower the speed limit, and Semra for mentioning it at the meeting. I think it's all in the right direction. I also wanted to mention that there was an article in the paper in the Seattle Times about heat islands. And right now, Seattle is ranked number 5th in the nation for a heat index per capita, because the temperatures here are rising 8 to 12 degrees right now. And Lake Forest Park is also included in the map. It's on my little link here. And here temperatures are rising about 8 degrees. And it's all because of basically replacing trees with concrete, asphalt, and heat absorbing surfaces in buildings, roads, and other pieces of infrastructure. So I think what we're looking at here is Sound Transit is one of the very big contributors to the heat islands. And certainly in Lake Forest Park, that would be the case. So I thank you for your service, and I thank you for letting me speak. Thanks.
Thank you, Vicky. Paula Good.
Hello again. Thank you. Also, I would ditto what Vicky said. And I also wanted to bring up that I had a meeting with Derek Sanford today at 10 o'clock. And we talked about the what happened at the Sound Transit meeting last week. And we explained, what did we explain? Oh my God, brain fart. That's what happened with no dinner. Oh, yeah, it was, we were talking about the purpose. We got in touch with him probably back in January, had a conversation with him. And he reached out to me a few weeks ago and wanted to follow up on the Sound Transit issue in Lake Forest Park. And when we discussed the great letter that you guys wrote to Sound Transit and about having a pause and that it had not been answered yet, he was very concerned about that. And he did agree that a study is very warranted. And while his involvement has to be somewhat careful, that he did say that he was going to be working with the Sound Transit Board to try to have them actually do a study to see if there's alternative ways to come through Lake Forest Park that wouldn't be as devastating. So I wanted to give that as an update. And I do believe that the message is leaching out and more people are becoming aware. And I think that they will consider it. So that's a good thing. Thank you.
Thank you. I have nobody else. Can you repeat? I didn't quite hear who you met with, Paula. Derek Stanford. Thank you. Okay, anybody else in the room like to speak at this time? Yes. Is there anybody online? I don't see anybody.
Hello, my name is Karina File. I'm a Kenmore resident and here today in that capacity, but also in sharing the beautiful news that we in Kenmore have signed on to a letter as well as our Mayor Herbig in supporting the speed reduction on 522. And we really appreciate your work on this and the improvement for public health safety that it could provide. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Okay, not seeing here. Anybody online wish to speak?
If you want to address the council, please use the raise hand function. Doesn't look like it, Mr. Mayor.
Not seeing any. We will close this as comments at this time. Thank you very much. And we will move on to King County Metro Lynnwood Link Connections. And someday we'll get a guy named Joe Smith here, but tonight we have Luke Distelhorst and Dave Vanderzee.
You got it.
Hey, all right. Welcome, guys.
Well done. Okay. I think looks like we'll just cue you. For
You
the
know, you
next-
guys can raise that. There's a little button on the side. No, on the side of the whole big thing we'll raise.
A light switch in the front.
Yeah. We'll send our assistant Matt out.
Yeah,
No.
watch that right here. It drives around too. It's pretty cool.
There we go. Okay. Okay, perfect. Thanks, Phil. We sorted out the logistics here. Appreciate it. My name is Dave Vanderzee. Thanks for letting us join the meeting tonight. We're here to present on Lynnwood Link Connections, which is our service restructure around the light rail extension up to Mount Lake Terrace. With me tonight is Luke Distelhorst. So we're going to tag team this presentation. But again, we're here tonight basically to provide an update on where the project is, what are some of the proposed changes, and just talk a little bit about what we're doing for engagement and for outreach as we're in the community in this next phase of our project. So just as a reminder of what the Lynnwood Link Connections Mobility Project is that in 2024, 2026, Sound Transit will extend Link Light Rail to include 5 new stations in Seattle, Shoreline, Mount Lake Terrace, and Lynnwood, and will later open a new BRT line, the Bus Rapid Transit line, along the 522 corridor. So the Lynnwood Link extension for the first 4 of those stations is anticipated to be as early as fall 2024. To prepare for the extension of Link Light Rail and BRT service, we're responding to changing mobility needs, improving access, mobility access for historically underserved populations, we initiated this project to engage with the community and develop that network of how the bus routes would respond to this new light rail infrastructure. So we're also partnering with Sound Transit and Community Transit on this project. So there's also a commensurate suite of changes that those two agencies are providing as well. Let's see. So just a little bit about our project scope, reminder about our project scope is we've got 23 different routes that we're looking at in North King County in the North Shore area, North Seattle and Shoreline. So a number of those are all day routes. We also are looking at our peak route service. And also just to note that all of these routes in our service area, the service hours invested in those routes would be assumed to be back 100%. Right now, Metro does still have some service suspensions related to some of these routes, but this project incorporates sort of a final, fully inclusive set of service hours for all of these routes once the service changes are implemented. Just a note about the project area. So you'll see on this map here, there's sort of a yellowish area. That is our area that we're conducting our equity impact review and a number of other analyses related to the project. So that kind of gives us our boundaries for the project scope. And as I mentioned, we're doing this in coordination with Sound Transit. And we also want to note that the changes for community transit have actually already been approved by their board for the future network redesign for changes in Snohomish County. But just a little bit about our project goals. Our project goals are pretty consistent along a number of our mobility projects, but for this project, just want to point out that we're looking to improve mobility for priority populations. Priority populations, we define King County through our mobility framework as those who are low and no income, Black, Indigenous, and people of color, immigrants and refugees, and people with disabilities and linguistically diverse communities. So secondly, we want to equitably inform, engage, and empower current and potential customers traveling in the area. Third, we want to integrate service that responds to link expansion and changes in the transit network and also is responsive to community needs. And lastly, we want to improve the efficiency, effectiveness, and environmental sustainability of the transit system. So those are our guiding principles as we go throughout this project. A little bit about our timeline and sort of where we are in this project is we have begun this project in the fall of 2021. We're already through our first and second phase. So we're in our third phase of engagement right now. So what's out in the community right now is a proposal that has been refined from concepts that were shared in the second phase. So we took what we heard, we made adjustments to that, and now we're out getting feedback on that second sort of iteration of changes. So we'll be out in the community through August here. And then the next step is that we'll take that final set of feedback, make any final revisions to the network, and then bring that to King County Council for their review and approval through our ordinance process. I'll also touch on a little bit of the highlights of where we are in phase 3. So thinking about just what some of those changes are at a high level. We're continuing to shift to an all-day frequent network that includes more evening and weekend bus service and really focuses on reducing the amount of peak-only service that we're providing. Link Light Rail will provide that sort of heavy lift, very frequent north-south service along with more east-west bus service that does not exist today, especially with the 522 BRT. In addition, maintaining or improving convenient transit access for equity priority populations, as I noted in our project goals, and including a number of kind of key areas within the project area. You'll see on the map there that some of those highlighted census block groups are our equity priority areas. So those are areas with particular focus as we respond to changes and develop changes to the transit network. And then lastly, we also want to highlight that we're expanding our Metro Flex on-demand service area in both Kenmore and Lake Forest Park that connects to the Mount Lake Terrace Light Rail Station. So that's sort of that sort of blob on the upper right of that map here. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a little bit. I'll walk through a couple of other specific changes that are affecting Lake Forest Park in this proposal in this third phase. The first I'll mention is the revised Route 331. So this revised Route 331 will be extended from Kenmore to Bothell. It'll be revised to serve the new Mount Lake Terrace station and make a connection to light rail there. It's also proposed to run later. So right now it runs until I think about 7 p.m. and we're proposing to extend that span all the way till about 11 p.m. Through the weekend as well. So we're looking at increasing frequency to 20-minute peak frequency and 30-minute off-peak frequency. But again, that big span change and that extension, I think, are the really kind of key pieces to this Route 331 change that we're proposing. The next change I'll talk just very briefly about, and I'll note that our partners at Sound Transit aren't able to join us tonight, so I won't speak too directly to the Route 522 changes, but I just want to make a few comments about the 522, which will provide frequent connection to Link Light Rail. No changes to the current routing until the full 2 line connects to Lynnwood. And when the full 2 line opens, the route will connect to the Shoreline South 148th station. Sound Transit and King County Metro are planning a local service for the stops south of Northeast 45th Street with local service. Sound Transit plans to revise 522 to serve Northeast 145th and the Shoreline South 148th station once that 2 line opens from the east side, currently estimated to be sometime in 2025 for the full length of the alignment. Metro is coordinating with Sound Transit on the timing of the move to ensure coverage is maintained in South Lake City Way and making sure those connections along Lake City Way are maintained. So there will be a phasing approach as well to some of these changes that we work with Sound Transit. Next, I want to talk about Route 72, which will replace the Route 372. So the Route 372 will be replaced with new Route 72, which provides very frequent service between 145th and UW. This is an all-day route with 10-minute frequency on weekdays. We're also looking for a providing a 7-day-a-week connection between Lake Forest Park and UW, which will be provided by the revised Route 522 BRT plus link at 148th station, Shoreline South station, or Route 72 at 145th. We're also looking at improved weekend service. So looking at weekend service on the 72. Right now, Route 372 does not run north of Lake City on weekends today. So this Route 72 will run all the way up to 145th. And again, thinking about the timing of these changes, this change would not happen until Route 522 was revised to serve 148th station, serving the 145th Street. Next, I'll talk a little bit about the Metro Flex area. So this is a new flex service area that would be implemented as new coverage where there is not transit today in several portions of this zone. So on this map here, we have a proposed flexible service area. And it would be added with North Kenmore and Lake Forest Park, also Southeast Mount Lake Terrace, including a connection to the station there. It would be covering areas that we can't serve directly with a 40-foot bus today. So these would be smaller vans and vehicles like that. It ensures we're providing service in our equity priority areas, which is again a project goal of ours. This would also provide an on-demand connection to and from Link at the Mount Lake Terrace station and the 522 BRT, Lake Forest Park Town Center, and downtown Kenmore. So looking at an on-demand service that covers all these major destinations. Metro Flex costs the standard Metro fare and includes transfers. So riders can be booked via smartphone or a phone call. So if you don't have a smartphone, you can call a number and schedule your trip that way. As proposed, this would operate from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. on weekdays. Metro is coordinating with community transit on a potential partnership, since there is a portion of this flex zone that goes into Snohomish County, on a potential partnership for expanded service hours in partnership with community transit. So I'll touch also really briefly on just other service in Lake Forest Park. So right now we have also Route 322 and 342. Those routes are not changing as part of this project. So just want to note, what we are proposing to change, but also highlight what we're proposing not to change right now. One exception to that about the Route 342 is that it will get some two-way service. Right now, it's a peak service, but that service change is connected to the Eastlink Connections project. That's a project that's already been approved by the King County Council. So that change is just sort of going to be phased in with Eastlink as that project comes along. So I just want to kind of pause there, and we'll have some time for questions, but I'm going to hand over after the presentation, but I'm going to hand over to Luke to talk a little bit about what we're doing for engagement and how we're getting feedback on all these proposed. That was
We have one question before you
Yeah,
continue.
well, just while we're on topic here, 372. So right now, I want you to get on the bus and go to the UW. I mean, what does that look like?
And the 372, essentially, if you're getting on the bus right now, the 372, yeah, it's a direct trip to UW.
Sure.
So,
And what is it going to look like in the future?
so in the future, that connection, as I mentioned, is replaced by the 72. So it will mean a transfer to connect to UW. Essentially, with the 72, with the proposal as it stands right now, is it replaces a high ridership portion of the 372, but for riders, say, going between Lake Forest Park or going from Bothell to Seattle UW, the 522 BRT with a transfer to Link or a transfer to the new 72 at 145th would provide that, connection, would have a faster travel time than what the 372 does today, even with that changing from bus to rail or from bus to bus under the proposal.
Thank you for that. Just a couple of data points for perspective. We have a tremendous amount of professors from the UW in this community. My late father was also a professor at the UW. From when I was a child, I rode that bus, 372, directly to, and I got off in Mackenzie Hall. So I can tell you right now that this level of service and change here is not something that this community likes to see. It's a big challenge to us. And we feel as though, once again, we're kind of at the apex of an intersection of growth in this community, greater community, that it's putting Lake Forest Park at the short end of the stick. And you're going to find yourselves getting a lot of criticism from literally, there are hundreds of professors in this community, as well as retired professors and academics. It's a challenge. There's two sitting right here right now. So I really am deeply concerned about this.
Thanks for those comments. And that's something we've looked at in terms of travel time and also level of service. So right now, 372 here runs 5 days a week. In the future, there would be a required transfer, but you would have more frequency, more service, and you'd have access 7 days a week rather than just 5 days a week like the 372 does right now. So it's always a trade-off of having more service and more frequency, actually on a longer span as well than compared to what is right now. So it's always going to be some trade-offs in how that's managed, and that's part of why we do the engagement that we do. So great segue if I can right there.
We'll just let him, can we let him go and then do the question? Council Lee.
It's the same question about 372. I was just trying to understand how a two bus route would be faster than a single bus ride.
Right. Part of that is with Link Light Rail, it's grade separated, right? So there's no traffic lights. It has a very reliable trip time. So once you're on Lake City Way, once you're going down towards the UW, that trip time can be very unreliable depending on what the traffic is that day. So you'll have a much more reliable trip on light rail because it's going to be the same time from 148th to UW every day.
Oh, I thought I heard Dave say that the two bus trip would be faster than the current 372 single.
Yeah, mainly around the 522 to Link Light Rail.
Yeah.
That's the time comparison that they've done.
Yeah, sorry, I should have clarified. You have two options. The option where it's a bus to light rail connection and that travel time is faster. There is also the opportunity to connect with a bus to bus transfer. Those travel times are going to not be as competitive, but that connection to light rail, as Luke had mentioned, is going to be where that competitive travel time or you can make up that time.
Councilmember Farratani.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you for your presentation. Just sort of piling on here onto Deputy French's comment. I'm one of these professors that's affected by this change. How am I going to get to the new 72 at 145th? Will there be a bus replacing that going up the hill?
So you mean like where the stop's going to be?
For instance, from Town Center?
Yeah, so you would take the stride, the 522 from here up towards the interchange and then transfer there.
Okay, so, all right, so just to follow up on that then, right now, I can get out of my house, walk down to here, pick up the 372, and half an hour later, I'm in front of Bagley Hall. Is there a guarantee that that's going to be the case because of the transfer?
Yeah, so Sound Transit has done all the modeling on the trip times, and they've provided that information to us that it will be the same or faster. So we're relying on Sound Transit's trip time analysis there for that transfer to Link Light Rail. So different than the 72.
Mr. Mayor.
Yes, Councilmember Bodie.
Thank you very much, but we already have testimony from our citizens who used to take the 522 bus straight to downtown, that the Sound Transit estimates that there would actually be a time savings to get downtown have actually turned into 15-20 minute time extras. So I just would like to reiterate my colleague's request that you reconsider the 72 route and at least begin it at our town center. That would be an appropriate hub, and it would serve our community much better to have that. So just if you're looking for engagement and feedback, that is something that I don't think a lot of our community is aware that they would lose this significant bus service. And we already have a lot of trauma over losing the direct 522 bus to downtown because it was so efficient. So people who used to take that bus are now driving rather than connect to the light rail. So because of the time that it takes to get downtown. So I'd actually encourage you just add a little bit more and come to town center. Thank you.
Okay, Councilmember Goldman, then Councilmember Cassover.
Yeah, sorry, I'm going to be piling on also. I'm another of the professors who takes the 372 on campus. I live right by the intersection of 145th and Bothell Way, and I this is basically the question I asked at Seashore and by emails, but I'll just repeat it for the community. You say that there will still be a bus transfer from Stride to the 72, but there really won't be, because between Metro and Sound Transit, you're closing the bus stops at that intersection. And so, for instance, if someone's coming from campus and they want to get to Lake Forest Park to City Hall, they're going to have to be on a 72 that makes a left turn at that busy intersection, transfer. That second bus needs to make a left turn at that same intersection. That's on, I mean, the way that, with closing all these bus stops at that intersection, you are making that, to be blunt, an ugly transfer. Also, for people in my neighborhood, it means adding an extra quarter-mile walk just to get to a bus at all. And I might be willing to do that, but I've heard from neighbors and family who have said they're not willing to add an extra 5 to 8 minute walk each direction every day. They're going to start driving.
Yeah, and thanks for that feedback. And I know we've discussed on email and at Seashore. So there is a proposal from Sound Transit, not from Metro, to close that stop that's right there at 145th and Lake City Way on the north side. So we're looking at some solutions with jurisdictional partners around how we can implement a new stop with some transit signal priority potentially to see how we can address that better than what is current. I'm not sure if you have anything else to add to that.
Yeah, I think you've already kind of highlighted.
Councilmember Cassover.
Thank you very much. Well, I'm one of those retired UW employees, so I don't have to do this every day, but I did do it for many years. I think that you have a big headwind here, not just the concerns of my community about the fact that they're losing that direct bus route. And yes, sometimes there were holdups, but you sat down and you just were there and you knew when you'd get off that you would be where you needed to be. The problem I think that we're all facing at the moment is the reliability of the light rail system. I've stopped using it because I just don't know if I'm going to get there. I've had too many experiences where the train has stopped. Nobody knew why, no information was given, and I've had to get out and get an Uber. So if that doesn't really improve over the next couple of years, I foresee Metro having to really rethink some of these decisions you're making today. So let's all hope that Sound Transit can solve some of its infrastructure problems so that people can actually rely on it. Because as you can hear from my accent, I come from Britain and have traveled extensively also in Europe, used many, many transit systems. And I'll tell you this, if it's not reliable and the customers do not have information about the reliability and what's happening minute by minute when they're on the system, they won't use it. So I really plead with you guys, pay real attention to what's going on and make sure that you don't lock yourselves into becoming a failed transit system, because that would be a tragedy for our region.
Yes, Councilmember Riddle, then Councilmember Lebo.
As a UW alumni, there's a distinct difference between getting off where the link light rail lets you off and getting off right in front of the building where you live, work, or play. You know, I understand there's a higher speed there versus the transfer. And I think it's just putting these decisions of two not ideal situations into the hands of our community. And just, we're so close, but we're just not quite making the right connections. And I think that's what this system is all about. It's about making those right connections. And I understand the east-west to the link, but yeah, I think that this sort of parallel north-south, while we don't, sounds like it's not really the ideal direction that the system wants to go, it's still necessary. So I concur, if there's a way to extend the 72, work on something with those bus stops. You know, you're not going to want to walk in the quarter mile in the rain just to walk a quarter mile in the rain there. And yeah, people will just lose faith in the system, as my fellow colleagues have mentioned. So there's your beginning of outreach and responses here. So thank you.
Councilmember Lebo, then Deputy Mayor French.
It's incredible. You've really touched a chord here. I am a 29-year UW employee, retired, 7 years on the 372 and 20 years on the 373. Just for the benefit of the council, the light rail system is operated and maintained by King County Metro. The riders, the drivers, the maintainers are King County Metro. Sound Transit contracts to King County Metro for operation of Link, as well as maintenance of the stations. So if you have issues with the Link service and the operation and the stations, King County Metro. So King County Metro has an opportunity here to benefit the public, or sometimes the fumble may be what happens when you don't get the handoff correct.
Deputy Mayor French.
I'll keep it brief. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And gentlemen, I know you have a thankless job. This is difficult. And believe us, this is actually gentle for us. Look down here, there's some ornery people down there. You don't want to get them riled up. Just a couple of thoughts. One is that I mentioned before the academics in this community who are drawn to Lake Forest Park. It's historical, going back into the 40s. And then in the 70s, academics were drawn here to particularly to from UW because of the Berkman Trail, additional access on maybe nicer days or less rainy days. And what I see here, and I look at this and I hear as we talk with the Sound Transit Board and Julie Tim, the Sound Transit CEO, what it appears to me is that this is a kind of a bit of a juggle amongst the agencies to say, hey, we can save some costs here And because you're doing this, we can save some costs here and offset the issues that we have. And I think that that is a really false economy. I think that there are ways here to, as my colleague said, the two at the end of the aisle here are far more effective than we are, the rest of us. The 72 extending it down here to town center, I think is the least that Metro could do in this regard. I really believe the preservation of the 372 is a critical, in some form, is really, really important. And you're talking about the face of a community that has a serious amount of academic prowess, and it was defined partially because of mass transit. I would say that very wholeheartedly, and I think that my colleagues would agree with me. And I think that that is one of those things where, when it comes down to the bottom line, to save money for Metro versus other services or whatever else, to patch holes, Metro would do well to say, we need to preserve these lines because of the use and because of the access to academia and because of the direct routes, for not only for forgetting about the professors, sorry guys, but the folks down the line who go, the students who have direct access. Because when I attended the UW, that was a very big selling point for me, as opposed to attending UPS in Tacoma or someplace else. So I would, again, I know you have a thankless job, but I would really encourage you to take that back to the folks that make the decisions. So thank you.
Good, it's my turn. I'm the mayor and I've owned a business, or we've owned a business since 1961, and I've never taken a bus to work. So there, that's the honest. But the other side is, how hard would it be to keep these lines that actually work for you until you can prove to us that the other way is better? Because we've been hearing from Sound Transit. I've heard everything since Sound Transit started. Everybody knows it's going to be quick or whatever. They've been studying it forever. How hard is it to keep the bus route that is actually working? Because you guys do have some routes that are really pretty popular around here, and a lot of amazing people use them. I don't understand why we have to throw something way good and then hope the next thing works better. My point about being in business since 1949 is we've had to adapt all the time. And we know what we do good and we know what we don't do good. And I just think it would be really prudent until you can actually see that that works, because you're going to have a heck of a time going back. And by then, like our members have said, you might make some riders never go again. And this has come from a guy who makes his money fixing cars, but I would rather see buses and everything else. And I've said this many times, but we got to be smart about this. So I would love to see if we could work a deal where we could keep what's good and then see if you guys can beat it. Okay,
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks
With that, I'm gonna let you talk now, okay?
Thanks for that.
No
And
problem.
part of the thing specifically around the 372 and whatever happens with this corridor is the timing related to the 2 line and the 522. So again, most of our changes would happen in fall 2024 service change, because once the light rail opens, we have a need to connect buses to those light rail stations and create some new east-west connections. The timing of anything that happens along the 522 corridor is really connected to when the 2 line opens, and we have trains every 4 to 5 minutes going north all the way between downtown Seattle and Lynnwood. So there is going to be a period where for at least, a year, trains will be running, and then there will be an increase in service on light rail with both train lines running. And at that time, we'd be looking at any sort of changes, because that's when Sound Transit has told us they intend to shift the 522 alignment. So there is going to be some time where the new extension opens, we change some bus routes, and some bus routes remain the same, including the 522, including the 372. So there will be some sort of phasing and testing that we're looking at in that process.
Good. Would you like to carry on your?
Yes, yeah. And again, Luke Distelhorst, I'm a senior community engagement planner. So this is my life. You have no need to apologize. This is what I do every single day. And I love it. I mean, it's part of the job and it's part of the problem solving, to listen to communities, to hear your feedback, to hear your residents' feedback, and then work as a team and see how we make it work. So As Dave mentioned, we're in phase 3. This is our final phase of engagement. Our first phase was really hearing about what the needs of the community are. Second phase is we develop a network based on those needs. We take that out. We were really looking for route specific feedback, so very detailed things. We made a lot of changes between phases 2 and 3. And sorry, I know we gave this presentation just last week, so some of the council members tonight are hearing this again. This is my fourth kind of link integration project. And this is the one that I've seen the biggest changes between phases 2 and 3 of any project I've done across 2 different transit agencies integrating with light rail. So as we move to phase 3, we're really looking at the network connections. Can you get where you need to go in this network, and trying to take a step back and have people look at it holistically, because a lot of our riders, they don't ride one bus route. They ride 3, 4, 5, 10 bus routes, plus light rail, plus maybe heavy rail. So we really want people to look at this as a network and see the connections across the whole area. So in our outreach right now in phase 3, benefit of summer is actually there's a ton of events going on between farmers markets, between local celebrations and festivals. I have to give a shout out to Lake Forest Park City staff. They've been fantastic in supporting our outreach. We'll be at the farmers market again on Sunday, and we were here a couple of weeks ago as well. So it's been really great to have the jurisdictional partner support from your city staff here. Our outreach is really kind of multi-layered. We try and do big general public outreach. This is news releases, social media, blogs, kind of high visibility things. Our open houses are a key opportunity for residents to come and ask questions. We do 3 online open houses. They're on different days of the week at different times. They include interpretation in 3 languages, and we'll also have ASL interpretation at our next one. These are probably the best time out of in-person engagements for folks to ask questions. At our one and the last one in phase 2, we answered like 115 questions during our 19-minute session. We have our full staff there across the project, which is usually about 10 people. So we're handling everything as quickly as possible. We also do a lot of outreach at transit locations. So high ridership stops, park and rides, transit centers, meeting riders where they are. It's not always the best thing to have riders come to us. We want to go to them. That includes a lot of outreach on the 522 corridor as well. One part of our outreach that a lot of people don't get to see, but is really important, is our engagement with our coach operators, our bus drivers. They operate the system every single day. They're the frontline staff that you're probably going to know best, more than you know me or more than you know Dave. Their feedback is really invaluable. We need to hear what is safe, where are they picking up riders who might need more attention and care. That data is all really important to us in our evaluation. So right now we're engaging with our operators out of North Base. Lastly, we do some direct engagement with key communities. These are usually educational institutions, income eligible housing providers, really groups that we know have high equity priority populations, really high transit ridership. And so we make sure and do some extra outreach there as well. In our project, we also contract with 4 community-based organizations. So these groups provide a lot of qualitative feedback for us. The main vehicle of feedback is our public survey, which is online. That usually does a lot of numbers. We had over 5,000 responses in phase 2. I think we're close to 2,500 right now, a little over halfway through phase 3. But there's a lot of issues that we don't always get in the survey. There's a lot of things that just don't come up, and they come up in other spaces. So through working with our community-based organizations, we get a lot of qualitative feedback from them that doesn't always show up in our survey. And a lot of changes in the network between phases 2 and 3 came out of feedback from these organizations. So lastly, again, because I'm a community engagement professional, this is what I do every day. I always want to highlight that at the end of a survey, there are questions about the engagement, not necessarily about the bus routes and the network, but about the engagement. Please fill those questions out. We look at them, we evaluate them, and we make changes, not just project to project, but phase to phase. So in the last phase, we heard some people didn't think that their route was part of the network, even if they were getting a rider alert saying your route's part of the network. So in this last phase, we put all the routes that are included in the project at the top of every alert. So if you're subscribed to a 372 alert, you're going to get that email I sent at like 11:30 today about our online open houses. And right at the top, it's going to say all the routes that are part of the project area, and it's going to say 372. So that was something we wanted to make sure people knew they were getting the email for a reason. Also, this has been really interesting as we're finding more and more people are learning about our projects from the physical signs at the stops. So we increased from 90 to 123 stops in the project area that we've put signs at. As you can see, these are available in 4 languages. They link to our project page, which then has all 11 languages available. And we're really finding that it's an effective way to really reach people. And so we're putting those out in the system more, including in areas we don't currently have transit service. So these are up sort of like North Lake Forest Park into Mount Lake Terrace, like where that new flex area is that we're proposing, because we want people to know that there might not be transit service there right now, but there could be there in, 13 months. Also, just real quickly, we have simplified our route sheets. So on our project webpage, every single route in the network has a sheet. It shows how often the bus would run, where it would run, how it responds to sort of the community engagement. Those are just always really complicated to do. It's something that maybe is a little bit easier for the transit nerds of us who really want to dig into it. But we're always trying to simplify that and make it available for people to understand why the routes are the way they are and what they would connect to. Lastly, because our phase 2 survey was really looking for route by route feedback, it was really long. It could easily be 40 questions if you wanted it to be, depending on how many routes you wanted to comment on. In this one, again, stepping back and thinking of it as a network, we're really looking at kind of the sub area. So we have a 522 North Shore sub area, we have a shoreline sub area, and then a North Seattle sub area. And we're really asking for how does it work in this area? If it doesn't work well, what's that kind of one thing that you want to see that would make it better? So it's a much shorter survey, and we've seen a much higher completion rate from people who get to the survey. More people are finishing it than in phase 2. So survey's open till August 27th. We're a little over halfway through. Again, we've had a lot of engagement. Appreciate all the comments and questions here tonight. No matter if a survey comes in on the first day or the last day, we look at everything. So once all the engagement is done and closed, we'll meet back again with our mobility board made up of project area residents, look at the results and evaluate with them, okay, what did we hear? What changes might need to be made? Work with them, work with our partner review board, which has jurisdictional staff, including Lake Forest Park, involved in our partner review board, and then move forward with hopefully a final network.
Councilmember Cassover, Councilmember Bodie, Councilmember Rattani, Councilmember.
Thank you very much. And I got to hear you twice because I was at Seashore too. So I have one question that I asked you there, which is when people make a transfer using an Orca card in the MetroFlex system, does it work just like you when you're transferring from a bus to bus?
Yep, it does. So the same 2-hour transfer window.
Okay,
Yep.
thank you. That's good to know. But the second thing that I'm really thinking about now, because of our discussion about the 372, is that this is like a bad time to be trying to survey UW because they're on summer break. So how are we going to fix that?
Yeah, so UW is also included in our partner review board, and we've done some specific outreach with them. So they usually send it out to Orca pass holders. And we actually reached out to them earlier this week as well to confirm if there were any additional needs from us in working with them.
Okay, well, I just hope that we're not sort of undercounting, as it were, people who have concerns about the 372. And I just hope you'll bear that in mind.
Councilmember Bodie.
Yes, I have some questions about background and how you consider this. So we all know that bus ridership has turned down. So my first question is, what does bus ridership look like compared to pre-COVID, compared to a year ago and then today? And I'm specifically interested in our North and kind of, or northeast end kind of area, what things are looking like. And then my second question is, I hope you're not just assuming a return to pre-COVID days. How are you looking at the future of mass transit in the new future that we face? And so what assumptions do you have that you're making for those? I realize that you're down into specific routes and people using specific routes, but I do think that background is important. And I, for one, am not really aware of either how exactly what the changes have been and then how they've been picking up, but then even more important, how what the assumptions are for the future, because I think to assume a pre-COVID future is not realistic.
Talk about ridership.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, I can give, so to answer your question, I don't have specific figures that would be specific to, like, say, the North Shore or, Lake Forest Park, but generally speaking, right now we're seeing, ridership recovery hovering around between 50 and 60% of pre-COVID levels. So, and that's a pretty common across transit agencies in the US. So we're pretty consistent with a lot of our peers. So certainly we're not to 100% of pre-COVID levels. And there's recognition that the operating paradigm has shifted as there's just downtown during the, AM rush and the PM rush is just not the same as it was pre-COVID. So, where we've started to see more recovery in ridership or new ridership is during the midday and on weekends. I think that's consistent of some of the themes that we're also hearing in our engagement in our mobility board about the need for more midday and weekend service as well. So we're seeing those areas starting to grow. Now, again, those are still numbers, much lower than pre-pandemic levels, but that is sort of where we're starting to see recovery sort of outpace sort of where recovery outside of the peak periods instead of going downtown. So, I think as far as our sort of background or sort of our paradigm is recognizing that peak period bus service, or running the buses as frequently as possible during the AM rush and PM rush, we can still meet the need and meet the capacity and still provide frequent service during those periods. But if we save some of that frequency, because we're not dealing with that peak of the peak demand, that also allows us to meet some of these other needs by providing some more frequent all-day service, more frequent weekend service, increasing the span of service later into the night. So if we are essentially using some of that excess capacity, I would say, in the peak periods and trying to kind of spread that out a little more, that's one of the ways we're looking at as far as how we're meeting some of this system needs as we're growing. And through these restructure projects, like these mobility projects, that really gives us the opportunity to hear needs that are more specific to geography and really target where we can grow some of that service. So again, like evening and weekend service is something that we've heard, pretty strongly as a theme through this project. And I think some of the changes, not just in Lake Forest Parks, such as like the 331, where we've extended the span of service and later into the evening, but across really the network, across really the project area, sort of reflects that we're trying to move away from this like paradigm where it's just the AM rush and PM rush. That's also reflected in the fact that we have really reduced the number of those peak only services. So in this current proposal, I believe in the project scope, we had 8 and we're down to, I think, two peak only routes in the current proposal. So that's a reflection of that peak period, that peak trip is not as strong of a demand as it used to be. So, but we can definitely get some more specific figures as far as like route by route, or sort of, again, routes specific to Lake Forest Park or the North Shore. But again, roughly we're at about a 50 to 60% to where we were pre-COVID.
And just mentioned from our phase one, like highest priority needs, nighttime and weekend service always comes up. East-west connections, nighttime and weekend service always end up being kind of the top three. I biked here tonight because I would take the 331 here. It does end at 7 p.m. So I have no way of getting home. So I'm biking home after this. And I think that's a perfect example that proportionally in our ridership now, we've seen a much higher recovery, way higher than the 50 or 60% that we see overall across the system at the midday, the nighttime, and the weekend ridership. So that's why there are some additional resources going into those in this current proposal. Planning long-term, earlier this year, the King County Council passed a service recovery plan for Metro. And so as Dave mentioned, our budget includes what's on the road today, as well as what's suspended. That service recovery plan really says, we recognize that 2019 is not today and vice versa. And so when we bring back suspended hours, we're going to do it through these projects where we get the updated community engagement and build a network that's based on engagement now, not from 2016 that built that 2019 network. So Lynnwood Link is one example for the north end, East Link on the east side. There's a future South Link project connected to the Federal Way extension of light rail. And then there will be a future Seattle area kind of service recovery project that will have updated engagement for how we bring back those service hours in the city of Seattle, Vashon Island, and these other areas that don't have a link extension project. So I'm the lead for that as well. So you might see me again in the future, but really we're looking at how can we have updated engagement that meets today's travel pattern, not 2019's.
Councilmember Farahani, then Councilmember Goldman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you for your presentation. And love the fact that you're doing all this outreach. And I want to echo Councilmember Cassover's idea to make sure that all the 372 potential writers are actually surveyed correctly. And I'd ask you to extend the survey time until September 30th, when all the faculty and students are in fact back. All right, I have two other points, two very disconnected points. I love your idea of the Metroflex. It serves a part of our community that isn't served presently. Is it the case where it'll be like the Lynnwood service where you're dropped off at your door, or are there going to be defined stops within the neighborhoods?
Yeah, good question. So as an on-demand service, so there will be some specific connection points, but also it will essentially be like kind of curbside service. So it'll be kind of a blend of where you'll be able to get dropped off at your destination, but we'll also have some specific hubs. One is I believe one was the Mount Lake Terrace station. I believe the other one is the Kenmore Park and Ride, I believe is another time transfer point. So that way you'll be able to transfer to local fixed route service as well. So it's a little bit of both, but to answer your question, it will be a curbside service that will drop you off at your destination.
That's great to hear, because I just found out recently that half of the road mileage in Lake Forest Park are cul-de-sacs. So of course you can imagine the difficulty some people might have accessing your service if you had to find stops. So I appreciate your answer. My second point is I love the fact that you're also trying to work on that east-west connectivity, but I was looking at your map and I'm still disappointed that like you, I'm a big fan of the 331. It's like the slow boat home for me. I love the tour of Richmond Beach and North Shoreline. It's kind of cool. But on the other hand, we do have a lot of students and faculty who teach at Shoreline College, and the fact that there is not a direct east-west route there is still of some concern to me. I wanted to put that in your head.
So 331 still connects to Shoreline Community College. So that still gets there. There are a number of other ways that people could get there. You could take the 331 to Mount Lake Terrace and connect to the 333. 333 will be a faster, more frequent route, and that goes from Mount Lake Terrace to North City and then across 175th and down to Shoreline College as well. So there would actually be two options to reach Shoreline Community College from Lake Forest Park.
Right. And I appreciate those. And like I said, I'm a big fan of the 331 too. But when you look at the map that you were showing earlier, there's this, what I call a transit desert, literally basically bounded by Ballinger Way, 145th, 15th on the west, and 522 on the east. So I just wanted to bring that to your attention. Yeah.
Thank you.
Councilmember Goldman.
Yeah, thanks. I have some comments about communications. And just the importance of actually, effectively communicating with the public. So first, on one of your slides about the 72, you mentioned that this won't take effect until the Link 2 line opens. And I've been following the process. We're on phase 3 now, and this is the first I've heard of that. It didn't show up anywhere else. It's not even on your website for phase 3. And so it's hard enough for the public to keep track of all these lines that are changing, let alone not be aware of when they're changing. Are they changing in 24? Or are they changing in 25? Second example, related to working with Sound Transit. In this proposal, you don't, Metro isn't going to be serving the 522 corridor. You're leaving that to Sound Transit. In your long range plan, you have a rapid ride line that goes between UW, Bothell, and Seattle. And that's a bit confusing. And at Sound Transit, when they talked to the community last week, they said that they're building their stride stations on the assumption that Metro will be serving the corridor again. And that this is only a temporary change rather than a new normal. And so it would be helpful to get that sort of clarity. And what is does Metro have a new long range plan? How should that impact how Sound Transit is designing the stride system? Third example relates to my intersection, 145th and Bothell Way. Apparently, it was June 2020 that Sound Transit and Metro decided that those stops would be closed, that the westbound stop by McDonald's. But it was only last month that I heard secondhand through a city staff member that was the actual plan. So there was a 3-year gap where my neighborhood, which would very much like to know if we're going to lose 75% of our bus service, was completely in the dark about this. And most of them still are, because I happen to have connections to city staff members that most people in my neighborhood do not have. And so that sort of outreach, it is very much in the weeds, but it's also hugely important for local bus riders. And so, those sorts of, that's the sort of information that really it's important to be communicated. Also, I do want to commend, you mentioned you rode your bike here. I think that's awesome. I don't have a car. I took the bus. I took the 372 to get to this council meeting. Just kind of sad that once this restructure happens, it won't actually be feasible for me to continue taking the bus to these council meetings. So hopefully Metro is able to continue to serve the community.
Councilman Brittle.
Briefly, just one final comment from me. The service lines that we are kind of reviewing here are great, but one of the things that Lake Forest Park was intending to get and will not be getting for another couple of decades is a park and ride garage. We have no official park and ride in this community. So anything that can ease the transition to transit in this community would be ideal, because it's already a bit of a struggle for us to accommodate it. If you don't have a neighbor that you can park by, and it's just challenging. So again, reiterate, rethinking about this stretch of corridor through Lake Forest Park, because we're underserved from a park and ride standpoint. So let's not make getting on a bus even harder.
Anybody else have any questions? Okay, seeing none. I guess, thank you very much. By the way, if you switch it around, Larry has to walk an extra 10 minutes in a really bad hailstorm and thunder and lightning. He will be getting a hold of you. I can guarantee you that.
I'm gonna have to meet him out there on my bike. I know it.
But thank you very much. We really appreciate it. And I'm sure we'll be talking to you soon, and I'm pretty sure you'll be hearing from quite a few people. So thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
You bet. Thank you, council. With that, we'll move on. Right next, we're going to do proclamations. The first proclamation I'll be reading, September 2023 National Recovery Month. Whereas behavioral health is an essential part of one's overall health and wellness. And whereas prevention of mental and substance use disorders works, treatment is effective, and recovery is possible. And whereas recovery is a process that the people recover in our local area and around the nation. And whereas preventing and overcoming mental and substance use disorders is essential to achieving healthy lifestyles, both physically and emotionally. And whereas an estimated 400,000 people in King County are affected by these conditions. And whereas we must encourage relatives and friends of people with mental and substance use disorders to implement preventive measures, recognize the signs of the problem, and guide those in need to appropriate treatment and recovery support services. And whereas we recognize 4 dimensions of recovery from mental health and substance use disorders, health, home, purpose, and community. And whereas to help more people achieve and sustain recovery, the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, the White House Office of the National Drug Council Control Policy, King County and Lake Forest Park, and invite all King County and Lake Forest Park invite all residents to participate in National Recovery Month. And now therefore, the mayor and the city council of Lake Forest Park do hereby proclaim September 2023 as in the city of Lake Forest Park and urge all residents to observe this month with appropriate programs, activities, and ceremonies to increase public understanding of the addiction as an illness. You know, sorry, I've been reading that for 12 years now, or whatever. The sad part is, the big part in there is we need to have a place for people to send them. So thank you for our recovery center, Phil, and what we're actually starting. Unfortunately, we need about 1,000 of these. But that is kind of amazing because I've been there. I know what recovery is about, and it's not as easy as this piece of paper sounds. And you really we need places. And so I applaud all the work the staffs of all the local cities did, because it really is important that we have a place to go. And we all used to have a city administrator that went through a lot of this, and we know firsthand. So sorry about that, guys, but I don't mind reading these proclamations, but I've been reading a long time. I'd like to see something actually happen with them. So, and now we'll move on to even a more important one. Thank you, Councilmember Riddle.
Yeah, I'm honored to be able to read the proclamation for Childhood Cancer Awareness Month, September 2023. Whereas childhood cancer is the leading cause of death by disease in children, and whereas 1 in 285 children in the United States will be diagnosed by their 20th birthday, and whereas there are 43 children per day, or 15,780 children annually, that are diagnosed with cancer, as well as approximately 40,000 children on active treatment at any given time. And whereas the average age of diagnosis is 6 years old, compared to 66 years for adults' diagnosis. And 80% of childhood cancer patients are diagnosed late and with metastatic disease. And whereas on average, there has been a 0.6% increase in incidence per year since the mid-70s, resulting in an overall incidence increase of 24% over the last 40 years. And whereas 2/3 of childhood cancer patients will have chronic health conditions as a result of their treatment toxicity, with 1/4 being classified as severe to life-threatening. And whereas approximately 1/2 of childhood cancer families rate the associated financial toxicity due to out-of-pocket expenses as considerable to severe. Whereas in the last 20 years, only 4 new drugs have been approved by the FDA to specifically treat childhood cancer. And whereas researchers and healthcare professionals work diligently, dedicating their expertise to treat and cure children with cancer. And whereas too many children are affected by this deadly disease, and more must be done to raise awareness and find a cure. Now, therefore, the mayor and city council of the Lake Forest Park do hereby proclaim September 2023 as Childhood Cancer Awareness Month in the city of Lake Forest Park, and urge all residents to join in encouraging young people fighting cancer, honoring young people who have lost their lives to childhood cancer, and expressing gratitude to the doctors and nurses who provide special care to patients and families affected by childhood cancer. In witness thereof, signed this 10th day of August 2023, Jeff Johnson, Mayor.
Thank you, Councilmember Riddle. Okay, with that, folks, we're going to move on the consent calendar.
So moved.
Second.
Consent calendar is moving second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any nays? Okay, passes unanimously. On to ordinance and resolutions for action. First up, welcome, Chief. The first one is going to be ordinance 23-1274, amending the 2023 budget positions and salary schedule incorporated, and ordinance number 1256, adopting the 2023-2024 biennial budget.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, Council. You'll see a little bit of me tonight, it sounds like. So at the July 24th Committee of the Whole meeting, staff requested direction from Council regarding the need to hire 3 additional limited term police officers. The consensus of the Council was to move forward with the hiring of 3 additional officers in order to continue to provide the same level of service for the citizens of Lake Forest Park. In order to do that, the 23-24 budgeted positions and salary schedule needed to be amended. The police department currently operates with 23 full-time employees, which 21 are commissioned officers. There's 2 open positions for police officers, and a new recruit was hired on May 1st. but will only attend the academy in December. So this recruit will start working as a solo officer on the road around August of 2024. Additionally, a sergeant recently resigned on July 15th, but we have kept him reassigned to the administrative duties until May of 2024 to focus on staffing and reaccreditation for 24. This leaves one more open FTE and a sergeant position to fill, resulting in 4 positions that are not deployable on the road, reducing the patrol to 11 deployable elements. Furthermore, there are officers out due to injury and paternity leave. Retirements are another major concern, with 6 commissioned officers currently eligible to retire, including those all in leadership roles from the sergeant to chief. Additionally, 7 commissioned officers will be eligible to retire within the next 3 years, which means approximately 1/3 of the police department will be eligible to retire in that timeframe. The hiring process has been challenging, with numerous applicants going through oral boards and background checks. Unfortunately, many applicants did not pass these stages, significantly prolonging the process. Only 1 applicant has been hired successfully, and a few laterals and good potential hires remain on the civil service list. To address these staffing challenges and prepare for expected changes in the coming years, the city requests authorization to overhire by +3 positions from the budgeted 23 FTEs. These additional limited term employees will allow the department to navigate the extensive hiring and training process more effectively. Newly hired employees will undergo a 1-year probation period to ensure their long-term success within the department. As officers leave to retirement or other reasons, these LTEs will fill in the currently approved budgeted positions. By overhiring, the department can open up opportunities for promising candidates who may need to rank higher on the civil service list. It also provides backup and options in case some applicants fail to pass backgrounds, fail to fit into police work, or struggle during the academy or field training program. Overhiring has been successful practice in the past for the police department and is currently employed in the private sector. It helps maintain the department's health and culture while preparing for the arrival of new officers. Considering the projected retirements, current staffing levels, and sustainability projections, approving the authority to exceed the current budget by up to 3 positions is essential to address the existing gaps and build a strong team for the future. Taking action now will allow the department to maintain its effectiveness, culture, and training standards as it moves into a new era of policing. So with the option to hire 3 additional LTEs, the police department will be able to maintain that level of service to citizens that are expected from the police department. The average cost of employing a police officer, including benefit, ranges from $150,000 to $180,000. Considering the plan to overhire 3 additional officers, the total request for the salary fund would be a maximum of $540,000 over the budget. However, this amount will vary over time due to dynamic nature of staffing. As new officers are hired and receive their salaries, there may be periods when some officers leave, resulting in salary savings during the times when these 3 additional positions still need to be staffed. So we are respectfully requesting adoption of Ordinance 23-1274 to provide the option to hire 3 limited term employees.
Deputy Mayor French.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Chief. I'll be really brief. First of all, I want to thank you and your department for what you do for our community. Thank you, immense value to the character of our community, and you built a department that is second to none, honestly. And I fully support this proposal. I would encourage my colleagues to consider suspending the 3-touch rule tonight so that we don't have a delay during the recess in terms of hiring and moving forward, because as the chief has indicated, there's a bit of a bow wave coming here and we really need to move forward. Having said that, we're creating more work for ourselves on the Budget and Finance Committee, but we will get there. And I really do appreciate all your efforts.
Thanks, Chief. Councilmember Cassover.
Did you actually move suspending of the 3-touch rule?
I did not.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm prepared to move that we suspend the 3-touch rule so that we can deal with this issue tonight.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved in second to remove the 3-touch rule on Ordinance 23-1274. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any nays? Thank you, council. Pass unanimously. We'll move on now to, do you have any other questions?
Well, I
discussion?
just to speak to
Yep.
the reason I did that is that I agree completely with Deputy Mayor French that this is a matter of some urgency. And it is a matter of real importance to our city and how it functions. And I have every confidence that our chief will do a great job in managing this additional budget that we are going to approve and in keeping our police department at the level of excellence that we enjoy now. So thank you so much for all you do.
Thank you.
Councilmember Bodie.
Yes, I'd like to echo the support of my colleagues and just say, I think this is a smart and strategic approach to the situation we face. And it is a necessary approach. So again, I have confidence that the additional funds will be spent effectively. But this is, I think, a way other communities, other agencies have gone to handle with similar situations. And so it's a tried and tested approach to help resolve the situation.
Thank you.
And let the chief get a good night's sleep.
Councilmember Fairtime, then actually, you know, we're gonna change up. Councilmember Goldman and then Councilmember Fairtime.
Yeah, I'll be supporting this. I think it's pragmatic. I wanted to talk about culture. I think our police department does have a good relationship with the community, a culture of respecting the community, serving the community. And that culture doesn't happen spontaneously. It requires mentorship from senior officers to new officers, which means we need to have a robust population of both so that mentorship chain can continue. And so that's why it's
Absolutely.
important to make sure that we don't end up extremely short-staffed.
Absolutely on point. And Councilmember Lebo said it as well, as we need to be approachable police department. And I need that culture to continue. And as you know, in a university setting, having that culture takes a long time to build. Everybody knows with every job they've ever been in. Thank
Councilmember Fairtime.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Chief, for a great presentation. I'll be supporting this motion. And the question I have is more structural, which is, I'm imagining a council in 2053 encountering the same problem because we hired this cohort and they're all going to retire pretty much the same time. Is there any structural way to avoid this problem?
It has been going on for a long time. I don't know the answer. I mean, I think this, like, I think I said this earlier, it really started when Bill Clinton put that law in that brought in so many police officers at that particular time. So you had an influx of a lot of staff, and then now they've aged out and we're starting to see that 25-30-year mark where people are going. So now we're doing it kind of again, which goes to how do we solve that? I don't know unless we generationally are able to build smartly through, but just want good people. And I'm not going to be here in 52. Sorry.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Councilmember Deputy Mayor French. could you-
I'd like to go ahead and move ordinance 23-1274, amending the 2023 budgeted positions and salary schedule incorporated in ordinance 1256, adopting the 2023-2024 biennial budget.
Second.
Moving second. Any other discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of ordinance 23-1274, please say aye.
Aye.
Any nays? Passed unanimously, council. Thank you very much. And I don't really need to say anything because I think everybody in the city knows what I think of our police department.
Thank you,
very
Mayor.
much.
We do.
Yes,
And
I know you. do.
sorry, Director Vaughn. And budget committee.
How the real work starts, right?
Yeah.
We'll get there.
I can't hold it anymore. Happy birthday, Lindsay. I told her she should go home, but she won't listen to the mayor. So if anybody on the council wants to tell her to get her butt out of here, you're more than welcome to do that. So I don't think she will, though. So after that, we're gonna move to resolution 23-1907, authorizing an interlocal agreement with the city of Sunnyside for jail services. I will say I drove by the jail last week and I did not go in because they were unloading a van of, I think they were probably prisoners. They looked kind of busy, but it looked fairly new and clean and nice. And so
Yeah, and I'll get into it, but according to the ILA, we're able to go out there and inspect it whenever we need to. So if there was any issues, that's built in. I just want to say thank you again for that support. I know the police department's asking for more money and we have another thing that we need to talk about, and I just appreciate the support. But this one is actually reducing expenses. So this is a good thing here. So on December 31st, 22, the city of Yakima made the decision to terminate the ILA that they had with us providing extended housing for inmates from Lake Forest Park Municipal Court. And consequently, the city had to turn to the correctional facilities in King County and Snohomish County to accommodate inmates for longer periods, resulting in escalated costs. Fortunately, the city of Sunnyside came forward and extended an offer to provide the long-term correctional services to Lake Forest Park. After thorough evaluation, the city's staff found that this proposition to be advantageous. In order to proceed with utilizing Sunnyside services, two municipalities needed to establish this ILA. So starting around October of 22 last year, the expenses related to correctional services have experienced significant growth. The monthly cost, which used to be averaging around 20,000 with Snohomish County, which is a lot more affordable option compared to King County, surged to around 40,000 over the past several months. This increase can be attributed in part to proactive patrolling, a rise in service requests, and the impact of COVID-19, which led to the decrease in bookings during that particular period of time. So with the situation returning to normal, the number of bookings has subsequently risen. And also of note is a new judge that is holding defendants accountable in their actions. So a crucial aspect of the proposed ILA with Sunnyside pertains to the cost structure. The agreement involves a daily rate of $60 per inmate, which covers both accommodation and transportation by Sunnyside Corrections staff without any additional booking fees. In comparison, the 23 rates for King County entailed a booking fee of $262 and a daily maintenance fee of $256. So correspondingly, Snohomish County's rates included a booking fee of $134 and a daily rate maintenance fee of $187. And there's all kinds of other fees that are in there, like medical and those kind of issues. By opting for Sunnyside Jail Services, there's a significant potential for reducing overall expenditures associated with correctional services. And in light of these considerations, the recommendation is to proceed with signing the ILA with Sunnyside for their jail service commitments.
Council. Oh, there, Councilmember Cassover.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Chief, thank you very much. And I'm very curious about this jail in Sunnyside, which is in a fairly rural area of the state. I'm thrilled that they're able to do this at such a very affordable rate. The one question that I have, and I have it because I spend a little bit of time talking to people in our court here about the kinds of individuals who we need to send to jail. Many of these individuals have mental health issues. Sunnyside is pretty remote, and I'm kind of wondering what they've told us about the access that they have to mental health professionals and medical professionals if they need them for those who they are in custody with them. What do you know about that? Can you help me feel better about this situation?
Sure. Well, I don't know about feel better because I don't have the perfect answer, but in generality, if there's extreme cases, they don't go to Sunnyside because they don't have that facility. They have the more generic medical help. Most of the people that likely will be sent there aren't going to have the level of mental health issues that you're describing. They're going to end up in a different route. These are individuals that have already been through the court system and have been sentenced. Generally, before that happens, if there's mental health issues, they're going to go to a mental health court and they're going to be a different route. The folks that are not really on that level won't be going to Sunnyside on a general basis. I'm hoping Lynnwood opens up pretty soon. I think there's probably another year to go where we're going to end up diverting more there, where they have these mental health and medical solutions that'll be a little easier. And the folks that we'll be running into with our trauma center or the crisis center. But when you mention your rural, it's not too far off from where Yakima is also, which we've been using for many years anyway. And several agencies use Sunnyside as their service for corrections. I talked to Clyde Hill's chief yesterday or 2 days ago. They've been using their service for quite a long time. Enumclaw was one of the jails we were looking at to do this particular long-term commitment. And theirs was not as favorable in the direction we wanted to go. And Enumclaw actually uses Sunnyside as well. And they have their own jail for long-term commitments because it's a good deal and they've gotten good services. So for the most part, the people that you're describing don't generally go to Sunnyside. But they do have medical help there on a really low basis. If we have somebody that's very acute and major issues, they won't even accept them. And we have to find King County, Snow County, some other options. I know talking to a chief again 2 days ago, many of their people that are having mental health issues that are going to SCORE, they're about $500 a night. And the joke was made, you can send somebody up to Snoqualmie Falls at the hotel there cheaper and get spa and, you know, rehab and all that kind of stuff cheaper than sending people to it's incredible the costs that are involved. So
I understand. Well, thank you very much. That does help me feel better.
Council members? Yes, Councilmember Riddle.
Well, I understand we need this and I just keep coming back to the disenfranchising those folks that are in the jail with their ability to vote. They're in a completely different part of the state. They're completely disconnected. It's not something we're going to solve. But it's an additional hardship that's really frustrating that we have no way to deal with. But I see the cost issues and I see the need. Do you know off the top of your head what the duration for our typical Sunnyside jail folks would be?
I'm not gonna have a perfect number, but I was gonna actually say this when you said not being able to vote. Most people aren't in there more than 120 days anyway. So most of them are in that 30-day to 120-day range. I know that we have 3 to 5 at a time that are in this particular situation. So it's not like we have 100 people in this. And the judge had emailed me today, kind of giving me 3 individuals that are focused on right now. One is an extreme protection order violation several times. This is a dangerous individual that should be in jail. And I think that one had 120 days. Somebody else had 31. And somebody was less than that.
Okay.
And but I mean, the voting and that kind of stuff,
Yep.
That's a philosophy on how long but most of the time people are going to be in jail for just a short period of time.
Okay.
They should have the opportunity to vote unless it lands somewhere in that October, November range.
Awesome. Well, thank you for that. I appreciate hearing about the timeline.
Yes, Councilmember Goldman.
Yeah, thanks for bringing this to us. And I know you've tried to be very financially responsible with your request, and it does seem reasonable. Just a clarification that this only impacts people who have gone through the Lake Forest Park Municipal Court system.
Correct.
Which means only people involving misdemeanors, gross misdemeanors, anything more serious would be going through the King County Superior Court system, correct?
For all intents and purposes, yes. There are some people that have been charged with felonies that go to King County, that through the state, but then they get lowered because of the issues that they have in the King County court system that end up back in our court. So they could be felonies initially, but then get dropped down. But you're absolutely on point. They're all misdemeanors. They are through our court and their sentences. They've already been through the entire system and they've been sentenced by the judge.
Thank you.
Council, anybody like to move this?
Sure, I'll go ahead and move resolution 23-1907, authorizing an interlocal agreement with the city of Sunnyside for jail services.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved in second. Do I have any discussion, council, on this? Okay, yes, Councilmember Goldman.
Yeah, since this is our first touch, I'd like to move that we suspend the 3-touch rule relating to resolution 23-1907.
Second.
It's been moved in second to remove the 3-touch rule from resolution 23-1907. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
With that, we will put the vote for resolution
Fair.
23-1907.
Can I say something just before you vote? One thing just to keep in mind, it doesn't affect your voting right now, but the cost of this will go up in the future. So just be aware that at some point, I know that they're going to raise the rates and I'll be back explaining this to you. Right now, this is the way. Yes. Yes.
Please tell us.
I know.
60 days.
We need to make light of it.
All those in favor of resolution 23-1907, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? You know, Chief, I don't think in the 12 years I've been here, I've had anybody interrupt an authorization of a resolution that they were gonna get.
I know, that's me.
Yeah.
You live dangerously.
Yes, you do.
Congratulations, you're.
Thanks, Chief.
Thank you.
Okay, on to our city administrator, Mr. Hill. Welcome. First up is going to be resolution 23-1908, authorizing the mayor to sign an agreement for consultant services with SCJ Alliance for the 2024 periodic update of the City of Lake Forest Park Comprehensive Plan. Now I know why Maddie is.
You do. No, Maddie just likes us, wanted to come to the meeting, so.
Yeah. Yeah.
So thank you, Mayor. Wow, I don't know what just happened to this. Oh, hell, sorry. I bumped a key on my way up here. So give me just, sorry about that. Okay, here we go. In May of this year, city did a request for statements of qualifications, as you mentioned, for the 2024 periodic update of the Lake Forest Parks Comprehensive Plan. We had a selection committee comprised of myself, Planning Commission Chair Larson, Commissioner Alvarez, Councilmember Fioritani, and former Planning Director Bennett. We had two responsive firms on this. The consensus of the group was to bring forward to City Council the SCJ Alliance for these services. We are recommending entering into that agreement for the periodic update. The total in this proposal is $219,920. This is fully supported by the professional services line item within the planning department budget. There's also the opportunity in this upcoming year to apply for roughly $62,000, helps defray some of these costs as a reimbursement basis through commerce, which we will be pursuing. I had one council member reach out to me and ask me how this compares to the 2016 update, which would have been roughly a 2014-15 contract. That was at $160,000. So you see there's roughly a $60,000 increase, but we're talking many, many years and a lot of inflation that's gone on. And so this is what Director Bennett and I were working towards is working it within this dollar amount. For which we have the budget beyond Planning Commission Chair. We also have Bill Grimes, who is the principal with SCJ. He's online and traveling, so I appreciate him being able to answer any questions for you. Just one thing I wanted to point out, there are some tasks at the end that if the city needs help, we could negotiate going through some of the SEPA process and some of the final tasks for adoption if necessary. We can look at that at a future date. A lot of those processes have been handled by staff in the past, so that's just in case we need it, especially. I don't want to be in transition as long as Public Works, but we currently have one planner on staff, so I will stand for any questions. Planning Commission Chair can answer any questions, maybe come up and give you a quick presentation on her take from those interviews. Also wanted to bring to your attention, while we are a little bit behind the 8 ball, and why I've requested also to do this in one touch. We did have SCJ come to the last Planning Commission meeting, meet with the Planning Commission. Councilmember Bodie was there as well. There was a little bit of reworking of that scope of work, a little bit of looking at the context in which this community communicates through public outreach. And so making some changes there. So we really appreciated SCJ and their subconsultant, Leland Consulting Group, is handling the housing portion. And I can say they're already up to speed on all the law changes. It was quite impressive. And then they also helped us produce a postcard, and I think there's a copy of that tonight in your CA report, that RPD was kind enough to take out to every block party that they want to leave copies of that. We're trying to get that outreach early and often so that we can continue that through the process. So maybe I should have the Planning Commission Chair come up and maybe give you a quick little her thoughts, and then we can stand for questions.
Good evening. It's wonderful to be here with you this evening. I do like you very much and appreciate you, so it's not too big of a lift. So yes, with Councilmember Fiortani, we did end up with a couple of folks, and I feel great about SCJ. They demonstrated both in their application as well as in their interview that they were ready and prepared. They outperformed any other applicant by a long shot. And part of that was because they were very specific about their plans, the way they would want to interface with Planning Commission, the way they'd like to engage with the community. And they were really responsive to our questions during the interview, where we talked about shifting some of the context in which they articulated their work. There were scenarios put forward for, different levels of density, and we had a long conversation about that's not our goal to just simply say density for density's sake, but density in service to our values and our goals for affordability and environmental stewardship. And they were really receptive to that feedback. And I thought that was a nice foot to start out on. But I feel really excited to get started with them. I think we have a lot to work out. We have a lot of ground to cover, but they seem more than prepared. And maybe Councilmember Fiortani would like to chime in on that.
Thank you very much, Carol Larson. Suddenly put on the spot. All right. Well, in any case, I agree with all of your comments. They were very professional. They were very well prepared. I think one of the things that sold me on them was their work with a lot of local communities doing their comp plan updates. And so they have significant experience. Their partners also have experience with doing comp plans. So I felt that we were in pretty good hands with that. And I believe from your Planning Commission meeting that a lot of the commissioners felt the same way.
Yeah, and we've worked with Christina in the past, so I think it's fantastic to have her back, and she just has the right personality. She's an excellent listener, synthesizer, and communicator. So I speak for myself when I say I'm thrilled to be working with her again. So.
Yes, Councilmember Bodie.
Yes, I want to say I had an opportunity to do almost an interview at the Planning Commission meeting. It was my most active role at a Planning Commission. Because I was interested in engaging, especially on the housing component, and interacting, making sure that the group that's going to be doing the housing assessment understands so much about what we do have, what our community values are, and how the housing assessment won't really be a cookie cutter for us, because how you incorporate density and our existing zoning, which allows more density than we have right now. Also talking about affordability, because we're not a city in the position to pay for to build new affordable housing and so forth. So I felt very good also about the coalition, the association here, and the complementary nature of it. And I did spend a lot of time questioning. So I will strongly support this, and I would support suspension of the 3-touch rules for this.
Okay, Council. Yes, Councilmember.
I just had a question. The housing needs assessment, how did they describe that to you, or did you not get into detail on that?
We didn't. They're not under contract yet, so I think their point was to introduce themselves to the commission, answer Councilmember Bodie's questions, and give us a little bit of an overview of the housing piece with the legislation that's come out. They know quite a bit, but I think a lot of folks are still sort of waiting on what the interpretation of some of this is. And I'm really optimistic that our city attorney Pratt will be able to help advise us so that we're not getting all of our information from one source. I'm really optimistic that the final legislation that came out of the state this year will give us an opportunity to create policy that can actually move the needle on affordability in our community, actually diversify our housing stock. And so I really, that's something I'm going in with, a lot of optimism that we'll be able to work creatively together to have those new state laws work in our favor, since that language was put into those laws. So
I'm just curious as we learn, how much are we going to learn about the existing housing stock? And we've had conversations on council before of
Yeah.
getting a better lay of the land of what our community really looks like, because we have a lot of high level ideas and land use ideas, but I'm just curious if there's any conversation that would delve into that. So it looks like we can continue that conversation later if we were to vote them in. So thank you.
Councilmember Cassover.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. And Chair Lawson, I just want to take this opportunity because we don't get to do this very often to thank you for all the work that you have done. And I know you are about to
Yeah,
do. A comp plan is no small piece of change.
Yeah.
So, you know, much gratitude and good luck to
Thank
you.
you.
And I'm really glad that we seem to have found consultants that you feel good about, because I think
Yeah.
that makes a huge difference. If you feel supported and in good communication and everybody feels comfortable, you know, working together, that's going to make it so much easier.
Yeah.
So anyway, good luck.
Yeah,
And
thank you so much. Yeah, we have a great opportunity here.
Deputy Mayor French.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would echo my colleague's sentiments. Thank you, Chair Larson, very much. And it really is refreshing to have somebody like us, CJ and Christina come to the mix. And I really feel very comfortable about the community outreach. I appreciate Councilmember Bodie's questioning. I've heard anecdotally things, actually maybe rumors, shall we say,
Rumors would probably be accurate.
about the Inquisition. I mean, questioning, sorry. But I think I really feel very comfortable about this. And with that, I'd like to suspend the three-touch rule in support of passing resolution 23-1908.
Second.
Okay, and it's been moved and second to remove the three-touch rule on 23-1908. All those please say aye.
Aye.
Any nays? Okay, passed unanimously. Deputy
Like
Mayor
this week.
French.
I'm sorry. I'm going to interrupt before you get there, so I'm not going to follow the chief. We do have the consultant online. I don't know if you had any questions for Mr. Grimes. He'd be happy to answer any, and if there are any technical questions, scope of work, anything like that. Otherwise, I'm happy to step aside.
You
and
know,
let
I am.
pass this.
I remembered he was there, but I thought with the four glowing, you know, recommendations we had, he probably isn't going to get on there and give himself a bad recommendation. I'm pretty confident, Mr. Grimes, if you agree with everything that we got going on here.
Just say aye.
Just say aye.
Just-
Sounds great to me.
I'd say. Thank you much for applying, and we really appreciate it. And anybody who can stand up with Lori Bodie is a fan of mine. I'm a fan of his.
That was
Yeah.
pretty friendly. I have to admit.
Okay.
Can't help it if I'm a lawyer.
Okay, Tom, go ahead.
I'd like to move resolution 23-1908, authorizing the mayor to sign an agreement with consultant services with SCJ Alliance for the 2024 periodic update, City of Lake Forest Park Comprehensive Plan.
Second.
Okay, it's moving second. Do I have any other discussion? Yes, Councilmember,
Just for the
Deputy
record,
Mayor.
We're getting old. This is our third. comp
I know.
plan.
I was thinking. Yeah, look what it did to us, Tom. We don't look like we did then. so. Okay.
Mr. Mayor,
That, yes.
if I could, I wanted to somewhat elaborate a little bit for just a second on Councilmember Riddle's question, because I think it is going to be an essential part of this. So that was part of what my questioning was about, which is we have this high level state legislation, but the creativity is going to come in both knowing
You bet.
what our situation is in terms of housing affordability. And, you know, we do have more affordable rentals, for example, than neighboring cities. That was one of my items I communicated, but the creative approach of those to our community so that it fits. And I think we have the right team to do that, but I do think that's going to be one of the, you put your finger on, I think what's going to be one of the most challenging but important components. So just add that to it.
Just wanted to add to that. I think that's where we'll need support from City Attorney Pratt is better understanding. I think it's absolutely true. We need to understand what our housing mix is in our community, but what latitude do we have under the new law to do something about that mix, to diversify it and ensure affordability that still remains somewhat unclear at this point. So I think that we're going to need some really sharp legal minds on this since Yay, yeah, okay. So I just wanted to clarify that. I agree, Councilmember Riddle and Bodie, that, we need that assessment, but we also need the legal advice on what we can do.
Okay, anybody else? Okay, seeing none, all those in favor of 23-1908, please say aye.
Aye.
Any nays? Pass unanimously. Thank you, council. Thank you,
Thank
man.
you.
Appreciate
Bill,
it.
let's get to work.
Thank you, Mr. Grimes. Good evening.
Thank you very much. We're very excited about this.
City Administrator Hill, you're still up, I think.
Yeah, I got CDBG.
Yeah, resolution 23-1908.
I
Authorize
couldn't
the mayor to
remember if
sign
NORCOM was next or what. Sorry about
First
that.
amendment to the interlocal cooperation agreement with King County regarding the Community Development Block Grant Program.
So I will go through what this agenda cover, but one thing that dawned on me, unfortunately, early this morning was that some council members may not have had a lot of exposure to CDBG. So I put together a little primer on it. So let's go through this and then I'll step into that really quickly for you. Honestly, it's only 37 slides. So the purpose of this agenda bill is to provide the city council with an opportunity to review a first amendment to our interlocal cooperation agreement for community development block grant between the city of Lake Forest Park and King County. CDBG, as you may or may not know, is federal funding through US Department and Housing, I'm gonna lose it now, Housing and Urban Development that comes into King County and as a non-entitlement city under 50,000 population as part of the King County Consortium that can be used for capital projects in designated areas and human service programs for qualifying incomes. The City Council approved the 2015-17 interlocal cooperation agreement regarding CDBG in August of 2014, and it has renewed on 3-year terms since. On July 21st, King County notified the city, July 21st of this year, that along with 28 other jurisdictions, HUD is requiring an amendment to the interlocal agreement that requires language related to fair housing and civil rights obligations. I don't think any of us have an issue with that. And explained to us that this needs to be completed by August 21st of this year to make sure that those HUD funds keep coming to the county. Sub-recipient cities, which we are one. And then the fiscal implications, obviously, if we do not accomplish this along with all of our partner cities, there's potential of that funding being interrupted in the upcoming year. So that is the quick synopsis of what's before you. And I love this because it has a big button that you just push and maybe it works. Okay. So we'll go back really quick and just give you a quick synopsis of CDBG. So you have two entities. You're either a city of 50,000 or more, or you're less. If you're 50,000, you're an entitlement city. You have your own staff. The money comes from HUD. A lot of times it comes directly to the city. Sometimes it may come to King County and then be passed on to you, but then you run the program. You take the applications. You may have areas within your city that have the way that CDBG looks at it, and we'll get to this on the next slide, is if you have an area within your city where 50% of the population in that census tract make 80% AMI or less, you have the ability to do capital projects in that area. So that could be sidewalks, that could be streets. That's my past experience. And then the other monies are used for things that you can look at as far as community development, which is, small business loans. You can do homeless housing. You can do housing repair programs. These are all lower interest loans. So there's just the breakdown. If you don't have a population over 50,000, it goes into the county. In some states, the county then passes on to the city, which was my experience. And then we would administer those funds. In this instance, the county has the coalition, and there are some rules by which they administer those funds with the coalition's approval. And then that's administered on behalf of the cities. We never actually even touch those dollars. So quickly, here's the census tracts for Lake Forest Park. So they would be 213, 214, 215, and 204.02. A portion of that is in Shoreline. But just wanted to give you a quick idea of each census tract, the AMI for that area. So that's the average median income in Lake Forest Park for that census tract. And then the percentage, and this was provided by King County this morning, percentage of persons living in that census tract that are at 80% AMI or below. So we have 30%, 23%, 37 and 21. To back up to the capital projects, you need to have 50% or more in that census tract for that tract to be eligible for those capital projects. So none of our census tracts qualified for those type of funds. But what they do qualify for, if anybody living in any of those tracts is below 80% AMI, they have access to CDBG funds where they can apply to the county through their community development. I got it on the next slide, but through their department to access those funds. And that can be something as simple as an ADA access ramp to a house, grab bars in the bathroom in the house, those types of things, and emergency repairs, water heater, furnace, et cetera. So it's to make sure that the housing is livable, but also stays accessible so people can stay in their homes longer. And so for us, there is a King County CDBG program. I've provided a slide that just shows the address to that. And then you can see how you drop down into their website has, as I mentioned, the housing repair, there are grants, there, et cetera. And so I just wanted to kind of give you just a quick overview of what CDBG is and how it functions as you're taking a look at approving the amendment to the ILA. So I stand for any questions.
Council, any questions?
No.
It's pretty simple. Done it for quite a few times. Yes, Deputy Mayor French.
I'd like to move to suspend the three-touch rule regarding resolution 1909, authorizing the mayor to sign the First Amendment to the interlocal cooperation agreement with King County regarding the community development block grant program.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and second to remove the three-touch rule from 23-1909. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any nays? Okay, pass unanimously. Councilmember Fertani, did you want to say something?
I just had a brief question for Administrator Hill. Do you know approximately how many funds are dispersed in the city annually of this type?
I don't. I'm sure we can track that number down for you, but I don't have that.
Okay, it was an idle thought. Thanks.
All right.
I'd like to go ahead and move resolution 1909.
Second.
Okay, resolution 23-1909's been moved and seconded. Any other conversation, any talking about? Nope, seeing none. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any nays? Passes unanimously. Thank you, Bill. Thank you, council. We will move on to E, which was one brought to us by Deputy Mayor France, resolution 23-1910, directing the administration to prepare a letter to WSDOT to reduce the speed limit on SR522 and SR104.
Our colleague here is requesting a 5-minute recess. If you
I think we're gonna have a deep discussion.
Yes, that's
I
fine.
would appreciate that.
Okay.
If we take a
Okay, go ahead.
Thank you.
We're
Mayor.
taking a 5-minute recession.
Thank you.
Recession. Hey, it's a
Recession.
Wow. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I appreciate council's indulgence in bringing this before you this evening before our recess. It had been my intent, as indicated in my email, to have this as part of our discussion on the speed limits at our committee of the whole, but I think this is a more prudent time to do it since we're going to have other conversation with Councilmember Riddle about topically here. So this is resolution 23-1910. I want to say, first of all, thank you very much to City Clerk Mr. McLean here for his assistance today in getting this tidied up and with my scrivener's errors corrected. And I'm just going to go ahead and read this for the edification of the council, and we will move forward with a conversation after that. I just wanted to preface this by saying that I think that this is an important time frame for us to get this move forward. The administration, with full due credit, has verbally communicated to WSDOT and Sound Transit our intent as a community to formally apply for reductions in speed limits both on 104 and 522. However, I think that it's important for us as a community to put a bigger stake in the ground, as it were, to assist the administration in this regard and ask them to send a letter formally requesting from the council. Exactly what I'm enumerating here. So this is a resolution of the City Council of the City of Lakeford Park, Washington, directing the administration to prepare a letter to the Washington State Department of Transportation and Sound Transit regarding reducing speed limits on State Route 522 and State Route 104 within city limits. Whereas consistency of speed limits on state routes is essential for the safety of all users, whether vehicular, pedestrian, or multimodal. And whereas evidence shows that a slight reduction in speed results in significant safety gains, and whereas lowering speed limits is statistically proven to save lives in vehicle crashes. And whereas lowering speed limits is also proven to save lives when a pedestrian or a multimodal user is struck by a vehicle. Sadly, we had a recent tragedy in that regard. And whereas the highway safety manual shows that even a 1 mile per hour reduction in operating speeds can result in a 17% decrease in fatal crashes. And whereas the speed limit has been lowered to a uniform 35 miles per hour on SR522 in the cities of Bothell and Kenmore. I want to put a big exclamation point on that. Whereas the speed limit has been lowered to 35 miles per hour on SR522 from 130th Street Northeast in the city of Seattle. And whereas a pedestrian struck by a vehicle at 40 miles per hour has a 10% chance of survival. And whereas a pedestrian struck by a vehicle at 30 miles per hour has a 50% chance of survival. We've seen these statistics before in previous presentations. Now, therefore, be it resolved by the City Council of the City of Lake Forest Park as follows. Section 1, directing the administration, the City Council of Lake Forest Park, Washington, directs the administration to inform the Washington State Department of Transportation and Sound Transit of the City of Lake Forest Park's intention to formally make an application to reduce the speed limits on State Route 522, Bothell Highway, and State Route 104, Ballinger Way. This intent must be communicated by the administration with written correspondence within 2 weeks of this resolution taking effect. The following changes will be requested to make an application for State Route 522 Bothell Highway between milepost 4.23 to milepost 621, where the maximum speed limit shall be 35 miles per hour and the speed limit and 30 miles per hour for vehicles over a gross vehicle weight of 10,000 pounds. And on State Route 104 Ballinger Way, 25 miles an hour for its entire length in the city of Lake Forest Park. I'll leave it there. Just a general reminder that two things, the Kenmore's city ordinance went into effect. A request for 35 miles an hour for the corridor went to our borders starting a number of weeks ago, about 3 weeks ago, I believe it went into effect. And historically, on State Route 104, it was 25 miles an hour until the early 1990s, and then WSDOT increased the speed limit. And so it has previously been a lower speed limit. And with that, I'd be happy to take any questions. Oh, one last thought, one last comment. In your email packet or email earlier today, I shouldn't say earlier today, there's correspondence from the city of Kenmore supporting our change on 522 to lower the speed limit to 35 miles an hour from Mayor Nigel Herbig and city staff.
Yes, Councilmember Bodie.
Thank you very much for the leadership and the effort in moving this along expeditiously, and for coordinating with the city of Kenmore to get that letter of support. I strongly support this and think it is really important for our community as someone who drives 522 almost daily and watches the speed of cars going by. And while you know, there's that general rule of thumb that cars generally go 10 over the speed limit or 5 or 10 over the speed limit, right? So this reduction will be an incremental improvement. I mean, would I like to see it be 30? Yes, but I think this makes the most sense. It's pragmatic, it's incremental. It makes a lot of sense when you consider even the speed limits below 145th as well. So we're like the anomaly really in the corridor, and we don't want to be the speed zone. So I really appreciate this and the initiative, and will strongly support it.
Yes, Councilmember Furutani, then Councilmember.
Yes, I wanted to also echo Councilmember Bodie's comments about thanking our team of Goldman's, Riddle and French for basically being leaders on this. And I fully support this measure. The one concern that I have is usually with these, we get sort of a fiscal note on it. And will this pose any further imposition on our enforcement resources with lowering these speed limits?
I don't think we have any enforcement resources being used at this time. I'm not being mean, but we really don't have a lot of. I think that's a question for you.
I don't know. We do not have.
Go ahead.
Just on point. Thank you, Councilmember Furutani. And fully recognizing the resource considerations that we have with the PD and the chief and staff. One of the things I can say is that unquestionably, driving through the city of Kenmore over the last couple of weeks, the speeds are down. It really is quite striking, and it's not wishful thinking. Even talking to the folks at the Pagliacci restaurant, they said that they couldn't figure out why things were calmer. And I said, did you notice the speed limit sign has changed in front of, right in front of the restaurant? And they said they did not notice that. And it really is, I think that there is a sentiment to, and I said this before, and the data from Seattle shows that just by reducing speed limits, even without enforcement, there's a certain degree of reduction in overall speeds, because responsible people are going to drive slower. They're going to be reasonable, and it's going to help force, there's always going to be outliers, but it's going to help force some of the people that are thinking about misbehaving to maybe slow down. The outliers are going to always be the outliers, and then we have the chief and his team for that.
Okay, Councilmember Goldman of Goldman Sachs and whatever it was. If I was ever getting a divorce, I'd be calling you guys.
Yeah, I'm strongly in favor of this. I do have one question. So the resolution says that the administration will inform WSDOT about our intention to make an application. And so I'm just curious what the time frame is. So it would be within 2 weeks, we tell them about our intent. What's the time frame for actually making the formal application?
Well, that's a great question, Councilmember Goldman. My intent, just reiterating the term here, was to give the administration a little bit of flexibility to decide on how the best path in terms of how that application process goes, rather than saying, and again, it's just basically saying, we want to do this. My understanding is that WSDOT does the study. We don't have to do the study on the state routes as they did for Kenmore. And full disclosure, as you may have seen from Councilmember Riddle's work a number of months ago, that WSDOT actually did study our section of 522, but in the humble opinion of a number of us, they didn't use the conditions that are appropriate to consider, and the parameters that are appropriate to consider what the speeds should be within our community. And so this is basically saying to WSDOT, or saying to the administration, please formally reach out to WSDOT and say, this is what we want to do, and give us the process. So to be completely clear, when Kenmore went through this process, it was sort of a lot of behind the scenes sort of staff directing or reaching out to WSDOT and et cetera. And we don't have that kind of resource. So I want to make sure that I wasn't too prescriptive in this regard.
Okay, thanks.
Councilmember Riddle, I believe, and then Councilmember Lebo.
Yes, and thank you. And referencing the prior speed study and Councilmember Furutani's concern about increasing traffic needs, speed needs on this stretch. Currently, the 85th percentile, where 85% are kind of going, the 85th percentile of speed. Just to give you a sense, right now, currently at 40, people are going 48, 45, 49 miles per hour. So I think lowering the speed limit, if people are still quote unquote speeding, they're going to be speeding at a much lower rate. So overall, that reduction, I think, is still worth requesting. And I think it wouldn't necessarily be an additional burden to the police department, because that's already a burden, if I might say it that way. Thank you.
Councilmember Lebo.
Thank you. Thank you for proceeding with this, council members. Clarifying, milepost 4.23 and 6.21 on State Route 522 are the Lake Forest Park city limits. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. I think our whereas would be strengthened, since we are talking about going from 40 to 35 miles an hour, that we reference when a person is struck by a vehicle, that it reflects the survivability at 35 miles an hour and at 25 miles an hour. Because those are the speed limits that we're proposing to move from to. Unless I recall that SR104 is at 30 now.
Or portions of it, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. 40
Okay,
and
so
30, yeah.
I think it would be useful to include 35 and 25 as survivabilities, to demonstrate that there's benefit to it. And that would be reflective of both on SR522 and SR104. I'm very supportive of this, but I am concerned about adding that gross vehicle weight 10,000 pounds or greater would be at 30 miles an hour on SR 522, because the slower vehicles in areas where people are otherwise moving at a more rapid pace causes its own problems. So I would not be in favor of a 2 speed limit for a small section of SR 522. So I would propose that we strike that. Unless WSDOT can clearly come back with their own study and recommend it, but I doubt that they would.
Yeah, go
Unless
ahead.
there's some clarifying reason why Lake Forest Park should have a lower speed limit for trucks through. And then I do have a follow-up.
Yeah, thank you.
I think Deputy Mayor French was going to answer.
Yeah, just on point, if I may.
Follow up.
Yeah, thank you, Councilmember Lebo. I actually included that partially because, and some of you who have been following my work here on the council for a while recognize that I have a real issue with some of our heavier vehicles that are let's say challenging our community, both from a noise and pollution standpoint, as well as from a safety standpoint. And the state statute that was just enacted went into effect last July, allows for a specific lower speed limit for vehicles over a certain classification of vehicle. And so that's part of the reason why I was including it in the mix. And again, it's not something I'm going to fall my sword for. However, it's part of me is included it because I want to get WSDOT's attention to say it is part of your responsibility to ensure that the commercial vehicles are being safe on in this area, of course, in conjunction with Washington State commercial vehicle enforcement, but also because our community is kind of at the apex of a serious amount of not only from the various businesses that are in our neighboring community, but also in Monroe, Woodinville, other places, and they're coming through our community, going to the various places that are going here. And when I see some of the violations that are occurring, just even you can hear them sitting here at 10 o'clock this morning when I was working here this morning, you can hear it, the vehicles coming through with excessive speeds. They're clearly in violation of a variety of statutes. And so this is more of a kind of a placeholder to say to WSDOT, hey, help us out with this. So I'll leave it there.
Councilmember Rayla's next, then Councilmember Bodie.
And the only thing I would add to that is that a lower speed limit will oftentimes reduce in lower noise generation. So it could produce a slightly lower overall sound impact from the trucks.
Councilmember Bodie.
I support the lower limit for the trucks. I think it's favorable, and honestly, right now, most of the large vehicles that I see driving on 522, again, I drive it every day probably, or very close to every day, are going over 40 already. So I think I think from a safety point of view, it actually is better to have them in the right-hand lane going slower. So, and I do think we're a pretty heavily impacted community when it comes to that kind of heavy truck traffic. So I support leaving it in if we have to negotiate with WSDOT on it. I think we should still continue to advocate for it and see where it lands up. So I support leaving it in the resolution for now and taking it to the next step.
Councilmember Lebo.
I am concerned about creating two different speed limits for vehicles, as all of the buses, including school buses, will exceed the 10,000 pounds. So we are now slowing mass transit through Lake Forest Park in an attempt to try and address what we consider to be egregious by a small population of people that are driving these trucks through Lake Forest Park. And I don't think that the speed limit is the right way to resolve it with the other impacts that would be created from, such as all of our buses will exceed 10,000 pounds. And so I don't think that trying to drive to that is the right solution.
I hear you loud and clear. And if I had a way of writing this in a manner that would exempt, maybe it's exempt vehicles are excluded. Because it's not my intent to slow down mass transit. The intent is to try to put the heavy vehicle operators on notice.
Dumb question. Does this Kenmore and Bothell and Seattle have that same thing?
No.
Well, then there's a problem. We can't, I think we're trying to get this corridor kind of the same all the way through. And I think, we need to, everything you're doing is great. I think we need to lower it down, but I do agree with the different speed limits, just because we need to, this is all one corridor. We need to try to keep it as coincide as we can or whatever. So you have Councilmember Lebo had something else, Councilmember Cassover, then Councilmember Bodie.
I will defer. I lost my train of thought, but if you would please come back to me.
Councilmember Cassover.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I just want to thank Councilmember Lebo for providing the information that I was about to ask for, which is, would this affect buses? I think it would be really negative thing for us to do anything that affected the ability of buses to actually make it through, and we just can't do that. So I wonder, Councilmember French, if we could strike that, but actually rather than have them say, and 30 miles an hour for vehicles over gross vehicle weight of 10,000 pounds, put in just some language maybe that says, and investigate the potential solutions for heavy truck traffic through Lake Forest Park, something like that. Just again, to put them on notice, but not to actually do what you're asking here and to make that speed limit a fixed, the fixed solution.
Okay, interesting suggestion. Thank you.
Councilmember Bodie.
I think the reason why we're different from Kenmore and Bothell is all the residences along our road. And the heavy vehicles do make a lot more noise, and by reducing speed, we reduce it. So I think something along the lines of Councilmember Cassover's idea makes sense, but I want to leave in the 30 miles per hour and the gross vehicle weight of 10,000 pounds, because that's part of what the state legislation allows. So, I have not wordsmithed it, but even if it said, and also, and consider or investigate in front of 30 miles per hour, that would be good for me, because I'm not saying that it's like 35 and 30, or we're gonna fall on our sword, right? So if we wanted to make it a little softer and put and investigate something like that, an investigation of 30 miles per hour for vehicles. And blah, blah, blah. So
And on point, does it have to be gross vehicle weight 10,000 pounds, or is there another descriptor that we can use that eliminates the buses but keeps the heavy truck traffic there?
that's the state legislation, I think, is the reason why we don't want to just say heavy trucks or something. So
To be done tonight.
What's it?
You're trying to move this tonight.
Yeah, I understand. And just responding to the two questions, I really appreciate the conversation, everybody, and I think that this is important. Again, that there is, and to answer the mayor's question, there is, and I could not find which route it is, but there's a route to the south where they actually have specific speed limits for heavy trucks. And I don't know how it's worded. I couldn't find the language. I looked for it, but there was time consideration here. I'm totally amenable to the kind of language that the three of you are suggesting. So
Yes, Councilmember.
Thanks. So on the one hand, I just did the math, and for each 5 miles an hour you lower the speed limit, it adds about 30 seconds to the journey. So going from 40 to 30 so if we drop it from 40 to 30, the bus takes an extra minute, but it's not even that much because the bus is also going to spend time accelerating and decelerating from stops. So on the one hand, it's not a huge ask of buses. On the other hand, WSDOT did look at our corridor and rejected it earlier. So I think there's value in saying we want to be just like Kenmore and Seattle on this one, to say, we just want a continuous corridor. They're 35, we're 35. So I think being simple means we might actually have a better shot of WSDOT agreeing to this. So I can see both sides. I suppose on balance, I'd be in favor of just a flat everybody 35, because I think that's what's more likely to get us a positive result.
Councilmember Time.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I agree with Councilmember Goldman, though I think that this is a negotiating position, right? This is basically the letter that's being directed. So one should always ask for the moon when you're negotiating. So I think that taking, what now turns out to be Councilmember French's extreme position might be a good conversation starter. And then we have the staff talk and eventually we'll get to something. So I'm in favor of keeping the language.
Yes, Councilmember Riddle.
For those that are interested, the RCWs create a maximum speed limit for vehicles over 10,000 pounds gross weight and vehicles in combination, except auto stages. Not know what auto stages are. As soon as you figure that out, let me know, but I believe that might be buses. So that's their language when they set the maximum 60 miles per hour on the state freeways. So we could match that language and that can be our shoot for the moon. If we want to do it that way, just match the state language. And then secondary is I'm not sure about the 25 miles per hour on 104 because I don't know how that's going to impact the flow of traffic that was studied that resulted in the roundabout. So I'm a little concerned that might do something that would muck up the flow in the system and the light, the way that they were. I just don't know. I would be more comfortable with a 30 to match what we have currently in that zone, and then but just take the 30 all the way up to the shoreline border. So those are my two recommendations.
Yes, Councilmember Lebo.
Thank you. I do remember now. I think it would be appropriate to ask that the administration file for an application within a certain time limit. And I would propose, pick 30, 60 days that we actually file for an application to reduce that. And then the second is just a point of clarification. We have a draft letter here, and I'm trying to understand how that relates to the resolution.
It's item 9A. It is in fact separate at this moment, but thank you for asking.
Okay.
Clarifying.
I'm gonna ask you what you want to do here. You guys have a really good idea and now you've talked it down into where we're very confused. So Tom, you need to see what you want to do, and if you've got to change that, you need to have somebody rewrite it so you can vote on it tonight, okay? So figure it out.
Well, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So colleagues, I think that I still remain in the place of, again, kind of echoing Councilmember Furtani's sentiments regarding the I don't want to ask for the moon, but I'd rather go in a position of asking for more than you know, whatever. We all know negotiations. So I do believe that it's important for us to consider this. To the question of the gross vehicle weight, I think that's something where WSDOT would come back to us and say that there's we need to have specific considerations regarding that. So Councilmember Riddle's question about 104, I'm a little confused about that question because speed limit was 25 miles an hour until the early 1990s. With the roundabout, it's going to be slowed down more. The recommended speed is 20 miles an hour on all the curves from 35th all the way down to 47, so, or 40th place. So I don't see how having consistent 30-mile-an-hour speed limit, I think, is potentially setting us up for a challenge. I had considered before that it could be 30 miles an hour from the border, our northern border, down to 35th. The challenge is a 5-mile-an-hour incremental drop does not seem to have a whole lot of impact on people. And I think it's consistent with what Seattle has done to say 25 through residential areas. And if WSDOT wants to push back, I'm happy to have that conversation with them, but they're going to have to show the data that proves it.
I drive a million, I go through a lot of roundabouts. I have a place up in Snohomish County. I don't care where you're at. You could have 100-mile-an-hour speed limit. 99% of people on earth can't do a roundabout more than 20 miles an hour. That's a true fact. They can't, they scare the heck out of people. So I don't think that's a problem. I think Councilmember Fairtime's hand was up before yours and then yours.
His was.
Well, I'd like to move resolution 23-1910 then.
I'll second it.
Okay, it's been moved in second. Councilmember Lebo, actually, Councilmember, I promised you first, and Councilmember Lebo.
So I would like to propose an amendment that where we speak to maximum speed limit of 35 miles an hour and 35 miles an hour and 30 miles an hour for vehicle gross weight, that be changed to that it's investigated or considered rather than a requirement of this request. I do think that I'll leave it at that for discussion. That we amend this to not be a requirement, but that they investigate.
Councilmember Lebo, I'm totally amenable to that. I would second that.
Point of order. I wanted to clarify your amendment. Are you saying, we would leave it, the maximum speed limit shall be 35 miles per hour with investigation of 30 miles per hour for vehicles over ... I wanted to distinguish between the 35 and the 30 in your amendment.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
That's my understanding as well.
Yes, okay.
So are we all in agreement with that? Okay,
So the amendment, vote on the amendment.
so all those in favor of the amendment,
Well, I'll
From
second it just in case we need a second.
okay, we got it.
I-
Okay, well, he seconded that one. Are we voting on the amendment from? Yeah, so all those in favor of has yours been, you've been seconding on
I
your
seconded
amendment? Well, you've seconded on the first thing. You just second on
Yeah,
it.
we seconded the
You're the
amendment.
best. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, all those in favor of the amendment presented by Councilmember Lebo on resolution 23-1910, please say aye. Any opposed? Okay, pass unanimously. Now on to,
Call the question.
yes, Councilmember Riddle, then Councilmember Lebo.
I did want to just make another note for the 25 mile per hour for Ballinger Way, that it is then likely to be equal to our arterials, and there's no it's not a better alternative to our arterial streets. And I'm concerned that if it's the same as 178th, why wouldn't they use 178th? Where, I have some concerns around the 104 speed limit being so low. I think we want to encourage folks to that corridor because it is a through corridor, and we don't want to drive them to do cut through because it's the same speed. So I suppose at this point, I will make an amendment so that we can move through this quicker. State Route 104, balance your way at 30 miles per hour. Is there a second?
I'll second that. So we can have a discussion and I'll speak to it too. Councilmember, Bodie drives 522 every day. I drive 104 every day. And you know, 104 is a real problem because you actually go from 40 to 30 in a very short period of time. You know, you're driving 40 and all of a sudden, boom, you got to go 30 and it's just a mess there. So making it 30 all the way, I think makes sense. But I do think it makes, as Councilmember French says, it does start warning you to do 25 once the curves come. And so I could see 30 from the city limits to probably where the roundabout's going to be, and then 25 from there. But that seems to me to be something we can fix once the whole roundabout thing ever comes back around, you know, sorry about that. Ever actually gets funded and we actually do it. But, and those 25-mile-an-hour signs are already there. So, you know, that is good. And most people really do slow down right there. So, I think I would go also for 30 from the city limits down to where we propose the roundabout, which is at 40th place.
Just point of clarification, the warning signs are 20 miles an hour, not 30.
Yeah.
Not 25. They're
Oh, yeah, you're
or
right.
for
You
20.
are right.
if
They're
20.
right. Then they go 25.
Yeah. Yeah, because they keep getting knocked down.
Councilmember Goldman.
Yes, I'm actually in favor of 25 for the whole stretch. And my argument there, so last year we adopted the NACDO guidelines. And if you look at the NACDO guidelines, if you were to categorize Route 104, you have one side of the highway doesn't have any sidewalks. There's a lot of intersections and residential driveways. And so based on that, if you were to follow the NACDO flow chart, it would tell you 25. So in terms of NACDO pedestrian safety, I think 25 is the way to go. Now, with this, you know, the whole idea of aim for the moon, I would say let's start by asking for 25. And if WSDOT says, well, we won't give you 25, but we'd be willing to give you 30, then that's a compromise I could live with. But I think we should start by asking for 25.
Councilmember Bodie.
I'm in the camp of asking for 30 within Lake Forest Park because I'm very concerned about cut through traffic. And that is a compelling argument to me. Sometimes I just confessing I'm a cut througher myself sometimes. So occasionally I try to avoid it. But that light of Ballinger is bad. Ballinger and Bothell is bad. So I support 30 for that reason. I really think it to the extent it creates an incentive for people to stay on 104. I think that is important for our community to avoid the cut through impacts.
Yes, Councilmember Lebo.
I'm not as supportive of this amendment. I think it should be 25. I think Councilmember Goldman raises a very good point, which is we should be focusing on safety. Cut through traffic does have its own safety issues where we're increasing traffic in areas that we may not want to. That creates its own safety, but speed has shown to be the most significant correlation to safety. And I would be in favor of 25 through. City of Seattle has Northeast 15th, 125th. I mean, they are much larger arterials and then they're 25 miles an hour.
25th Avenue Northeast.
Yeah.
Just one quick comment, and then we need to move on here. If I may, I agree with Councilmember Goldman and Councilmember Lebo on this in this regard. Part of it for me is looking at what we want 104 to be as opposed to what 104 is. And right now 104 is a very unhealthy place to be as a pedestrian or even as a driver, as Vice Chair Casso has indicated. I really feel as though with the improvements of the roundabout and additional pedestrian amenities that we will have to find the funding for in the future, that 25 is the appropriate speed limit to set the tone for our community. Otherwise, we're going to, and I'm less concerned about the cut through traffic as some of my colleagues from the standpoint of
Having driven around the city of Seattle after the changes in 2016, the traffic still stays within sort of areas that they are intended to stay on. And we already have massive amounts of cut through traffic. And I honestly don't believe that we can increase it that much in certain areas. And I think it's also incumbent upon us too, as we talk about traffic calming, figuring out ways off of 104 to ensure that those neighborhoods are protected too, whether it means that some of them are dead-ended for access so that there's a specific route, things like that. I think there's places to go. So
Okay, we need to focus on this, guys. Are you gonna vote? Where are we at? Does yours say 25?
it says 25.
Okay, and it seemed like the majority said was okay to do
Are
20.
we just going to vote on the
point of order.
amendments that can be
Yeah, then-
official, please?
Vote on them, please.
You have to do that.
What is it? What amendment am I doing? I'm changing it to 30?
Changing it to 30, that's the only amendment. If you'd like to
Okay,
call the question for the amendment.
okay, all those in favor of changing the speed limit to 30 miles an hour on 104, please say aye.
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 Any nays?
Nay.
Nay.
I think the nays had it 4-3, correct?
Mhm.
Okay, then we are not changing that. Is that correct?
Okay, now let's call the question on
Okay.
23-19-10 as amended by Councilmember Lebo.
Okay,
May I make an amendment?
sure.
I'd like to amend that we ask that the city administration make an application within 60 days,
60 days.
60 days to WSDOT.
That way you.
Mr. Mayor, can we hear from our city administrator on an appropriate timeline before we?
I would
Uh,
think that would be a
take
great
that
idea, because you do it.
Not knowing the process, I don't know. 60 days seems like plenty. So I think if you saw in the email chains today that Sound Transit Regional Director's already reached back to Mayor Herbig and said that they're on it. I will reach out to him and then figure out what that process is. If for some reason, there's some process that is unheard of, I will report back to you, but I think 60 days is plenty of time.
And Mr. Mayor, I second the amendment.
Okay. It's moved in second to have the administration apply within 60 days. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Okay, now the question. Now we're gonna vote on resolution 23-19-10 with both amendments by John Levo, changed to 60 days and what was the other one again?
And to
Investigate.
And then
investigate the
30
where the maximum speed limit shall be 35 miles an hour and investigate 30 miles an hour for vehicles over gross vehicle weight of 10,000 pounds.
perfect.
That
So
Yeah.
all those in favor of 23-19-10 with those two amendments, please say aye.
Aye.
Any nays? Okay, pass unanimously. Thank you, council.
thanks, everybody.
Okay, let's move on to the chief again. It's kind of the star tonight.
Did we want to continue on the same topic of the letter and do that first, or should we let the chief?
Let's just finish this topic, because I don't want to
Okay.
go back to it, so.
That's what I was thinking. Chief, do you
Wait a
mind for a
minute,
moment?
okay.
We've got one more
No.
topic on.
On this
On Washout.
particular topic too, I don't have a bone to pick with any of this stuff. This is all your policy driven stuff, but we do have
Obviously,
one portion of Ballinger that we would like to see as a traffic calming group. I just have not had the capacity to come up and talk to you about it. But the area that's 40 miles an hour, we want to drop to 30 because it gives us the ability to build this crosswalk that we need to do from the
Lake Forest.
condo, Forest
Yeah.
Park condos.
Yeah.
Across to a bus stop.
Yeah.
So in order to get us to do that, we need to get in that 30 range, and 30 just is consistent anyway, but I didn't want to get in any debate with you guys on that, but that particular portion, I do need to come to council and talk to about on traffic calming. Sorry.
Okay, Councilmember on your letter.
So as mentioned by Councilmember Lebo, also in front of you is a letter with some supporting sort of technical data that I put together and was going to bring to council tonight for vote, but the resolution really accomplished the voting part. So this is really just bringing it to your attention. If you'd like to sign on to this document individually, I can read it into the record. Lake Forest Park City Council formally requested our administration to apply for a speed reduction on State Route 522 at our August 10th meeting. This letter is in full support of that speed reduction. In addition to the important information in Resolution 23-1910 attached, we want to encourage WSDOT to take into consideration additional information that has been identified by our community. We are at a point in time where Sound Transit is nearing completion of their redesign of State Highway 522 to accommodate their STRIDE project. Their project widens 522 to add a northeast bound bat lane and sidewalks. The final configuration of the roadway will be very similar to 522 in Kenmore, where after a recent speed review, WSDOT reduced the speed limit to 35. One element of the STRIDES project design that relates to speed is its impact on our community via a 2-story concrete retaining wall. The city has been working with both Sound Transit and WSDOT to improve the visual design of this wall through tree relief patterns and vine pockets along the wall. While we applaud these efforts, the wall will be a large shift from a green corridor to a concrete corridor. Reducing the speed limit to 35 allows a reduction in lane width from 11 to 10 feet. This would yield a narrower road profile overall by approximately 4 feet and consequently reduce the amount of hillside that needs to be excavated. This would reduce the height of the retaining wall by approximately 3 feet, an approximate 19% lower than they're suggesting. A lower retaining wall lessens the visual impact on our community, reduces the quantity of soil being trucked off-site, shortens the excavation schedule, and reduces costs for Sound Transit. In addition, the reduction of the speed limit would make living in the single-family homes along 522 safer. While these driveways are typically considered low volume and do not generally contribute to lowering speeds, these residents are at a high risk as they back into the highway instead of the shoulders that they have now. We entreat WSDOT to reconsider the speed limit of State Highway 522 through Lake Forest Park, as this is a win for WSDOT, Sound Transit, and our community. Additional technical information is provided in the attachment, and I would attach also this amended resolution as well, so that would be part of it. As I know, any questions at this time?
Yes, I would like to sign on, but I have a couple of friendly changes. I think they're very small. First of all, I learned that there's a difference between a rapid transit lane and a BAT lane before. And since that issue is still in play, I'd like to replace in the second paragraph the reference to a BAT lane to just a transit lane. If that would be amenable to the 3 folks who are considering signing on, because I think we want to keep that issue in play. And then last, in the third paragraph, while we applaud these efforts, I think we support those efforts, but applaud is a little too diffusive.
Yeah.
We might
There you go.
applaud the efforts at the end of the day when we see all the details. So those are my 2 friendly changes, and then I would be glad to sign on. Thank you for putting this together.
So is this just something that you guys are deciding to sign on with, or has nothing to do with us, right?
Right. It's not a
Well,
vote.
it does us, but-
Yeah.
Not a vote, it's just to
Yeah.
help. I don't think I have any concerns with those language changes. I don't think it changes the intent, so, yeah. And I think the process then, I think as I would share this, those of you who want to sign on, I'll add your names, and then we'll share this tomorrow with the final resolution attached.
Excellent.
Okay.
Any other questions or concerns?
Yes,
Okay.
Councilmember Goldman.
Mainly a question for City Attorney Pratt or Administrator Hill. If 4 or more council members choose to sign on to this letter, does that create any sort of quorum OPMA issue?
We said no.
If your intent is to take a position as a council, one position as a council, then you need to vote on it at an open public meeting. If you're signing on as individual council members, let's make the signature lines say that. We've done that before. So that it's clear you're signing on as individual members.
So city attorney, so if it was Councilmember Semmer, Councilmember Larry, if they're individually listed, not the.
No, I
council of
think
Lake Forest
before
Park,
we
or just
written-
Semra.
we've written something in individual capacity or something like that. I can
Okay.
go back and see what we did, but we made it,
Put a precursor in our individual
Yeah.
capacities. Okay,
Yeah.
something like that.
Then, yeah, I think that we should make that change to make it clear that even if there's 4 or more of us, we are signing on as individuals. This wasn't a council vote.
Yeah, I actually think if you have 7 signatures, it's a little more impressive than just the city council.
Do you want to take a vote on it?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose, I don't know. If we want to take a vote, I'm open to that, but I think just on in our individual capacity works better for me. So, okay, cool.
Good.
Perfect. Is there, I guess if you email me, I'll add you to the letter if that works for my colleagues.
thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for letting me slip that into our schedule today.
Chief, welcome.
Just waiting on Matt. Get the presentation up here. So we're going to talk about Bothell Dispatch has dissolved or is dissolving and will be leaving. So we're going to be talking about that tonight. So in May of 1999, the city of Lake Forest Park entered into an agreement with Bothell Dispatch for CAD, RMS, and mobile data systems. CAD is, as you hear this throughout this presentation, is computer aided dispatch. That's what the software the dispatchers uses. RMS is records management system. That's the software that both dispatch and our records and our police officers use to input all of the data related to law enforcement. MDCs, MDSs, MDTs, those are the mobile data terminals or computers that the officers use in the cars and sometimes in the desktops. At this time, Lake Forest Park has had our own dispatch services, but wanted a software solution. This was a system to digitize the police department's processes. In June of 2003, Lake Forest Park dissolved their dispatch unit and entered into an agreement with dispatch services with the city of Bothell. So for the last 20 years, officers have been using dispatch with the city of Bothell. Dispatch services with the computer systems, software, and storage. In 2004, 2005, Kirkland, Bothell, and Lake Forest Park partnered in the computer system known as New World, now owned by Tyler Systems. You'll also hear me say Tyler or New World. We use the slang of New World because that's the police system, but Tyler Systems has a whole entire slew of different software, municipal systems, that kind of stuff. This software is integrated in all CAD, RMS, and mobile systems. All of Lake Forest Park's data is housed on the servers in Bothell's IT. We have a connection to our software running the New World Systems integration. Every mobile and desktop connects to the servers for mobile reports and records, including dispatched aided calls. And we pay for the licensing of these devices for the use of their software. So at the end of June 2023 of this year, the city of Bothell made the decision to stop providing dispatch services for Lake Forest Park, dissolving their dispatch unit, and is entering an agreement with NORCOM. The city of Lake Forest Park has been benefiting from a substantial agreement with Bothell for numerous years. These higher costs should have been standard all along, yet we've managed to secure a very favorable deal through negotiations. In 2018, LFP and Bothell looked into NORCOM services and realized it was a much higher expense. So at the time, Chief Sutton stated that we're getting a great deal, and at some point, we're going to have to realize these additional costs. And now we are going to be realizing those additional costs. Bothell decided to continue their dispatch services at that time, and we did sign another favorable contract. NORCOM is a consolidated 911 call taking and dispatching communication center founded in 2007 by 20 agencies, public safety agencies in the northeast region of King County. In addition to call taking and dispatching, NORCOM manages 2 radio systems, supports 2 computer-aided dispatch systems, hosts multiple technology solutions, and provides 24/7, 365 IT support for its staff and user agencies. NORCOM uses Tyler Systems New World, which LFP has been using since 2004. In our region, the most widely used software program for police CAD, RMS, and mobile is New World. Every single agency in Snohomish County uses it. The other software systems is Spillman, used by Redmond, Duval, Issaquah, Snoqualmie, and South End agencies. And then the third is Mark 43, which King County agencies use and their contract agencies. NORCOM has a governing board comprised of one representative of each user agency or municipality. It's the oversight structure, and the board appoints an executive director to manage day-to-day operations. NORCOM currently has 6 police agencies and 14 fire EMT. The police department NORCOM dispatches for are Bellevue Police Department, Clyde Hill, Kirkland PD, Medina, Mercer Island, and Normandy Park Police Departments. NORCOM dispatches for our very own Shoreline Fire and did so with North Shore Fire before they did that. I wouldn't say merge, but that's what it is. NORCOM has our mapping system and receives those 911 fire and EMT calls. And I'll just throw a little note in here. When a citizen calls 911 in our city, it goes to Bothell Dispatch. When it's a fire EMT call, it gets routed to NORCOM that gets dispatched to fire. If we are with NORCOM, that 911 call is going to originate in NORCOM. Right then and there, fire and EMT can be dispatched. So we're actually saving some possible life-saving seconds there in that dispatch option. One option, these are the alternatives. One option is Lake Forest Park reestablishes our own dispatch services. However, this course of action would necessitate the employment of 6.5 dispatchers to ensure 24/7 coverage for a radio channel. This would also entail the acquisition of necessary hardware and additional IT work. And additionally, the issue of housing the dispatch center arises as City Hall is already operating beyond its capacity, leaving us with no space. So regrettably, this option is financially impractical. King County only dispatches for their incorporated and contract agencies. Snohomish County would be the same, and it would be very unusual to have a King County agency being dispatched by Snohomish County's PSAPs. And we don't know the legal issues with PCERN and moving all of our new equipment that we got from King County voters to Snohomish County. So the only alternative dispatch systems that we have available that are semi-local is Redmond and Issaquah Dispatch. These two agencies house their own dispatch services. Redmond dispatches Duval as a contract city, and Issaquah dispatches for Snoqualmie as a contract city. Two big issues arise from using their service. One is the cost, and second is the computer systems. Starting with the systems, both agencies are running Spillman software, which is totally different CAD mobile RMS products. Beyond the increased cost of dispatch services, changing over to Spillman is cost prohibitive. Training our staff on the New World system took several years, highlighting the significant investment in time and resources, and consequently, the prospect of training the entire staff on a new system appears daunting and comes with those substantial costs. So I reached out to Redmond and Issaquah for options and a quote for services. Redmond PD is not able to provide full services under the time requirements by October 20th. Services could be provided in a long-term plan, but there's an estimated timeline of 1 year to prepare for necessary technology, staffing requirements, and data conversion. A partial cost has been provided of $640,000 annually. And that does not include the technology, other costs that would be substantially higher. Issaquah costs were similar, over $650,000. And also we would have Issaquah and Redmond would not be sending officers in time to help us out. It's just not practical. Bothell, being a partner in close proximity, has been very practical. So the current cost with Bothell dispatch services, equipment, and maintenance is $180,000 per year. That breaks down to $113,000 for dispatch services and $67,000 for computer equipment and maintenance. So NORCOM has been preparing for a possible move of Bothell and LFP for quite a while because we've had these talks. And we've used their system in dispatch in the past for a very limited time when Bothell was covered by our agency after their officer-involved shooting. So we spent 3 days using NORCOM as their system. I lost some stats because of the computer system issue there, but we were able to work with NORCOM. NORCOM provided an initial service cost estimate for Lake Forest Park for dispatch services. Bothell Police gave this data, that's our data, generating 9241 in incidents per year based on a 3-year average. NORCOM examined this volume, removed incidents that do not qualify as a billable call for service, and reduced this average to 9172 incidents per year that would be counted as billable. Additionally, NORCOM estimates that the police department would generate about approximately 100 data calls every year based on comparative figures from other agencies. So in total, using the projected billable calls for service figures for NORCOM's other owner agencies and considering their 24 projected budget, the estimated annual cost for dispatch services for Lake Forest Park is $463,560. This does not include the work that will need to be done with the current data and conversion of the new system. That would be an additional cost, and preliminary reports state it will take 1 to 3 years to complete with New World systems. So all of our current data becomes historical data as we move forward with the new dispatch system. Access and conversion will be a project that both LFP and Bothell will need to work out with Tyler Systems. We have already gotten ahead of this and been working with Bothell as they've been moving forward. We're staying with them just in anticipation of this happening. And it is a daunting task to take on, especially the time frame that we are in now. And this is a project that should have came to us with a year to plan this out, and we're crunching this down. So we will do it. We will get through it, but it's just it's a lot of work. So just on a basic level, all of our computer system data is not going to be compatible with the version of New World that they are currently running. So there's going to be a conversion that needs to be done. And so we might be, because we're still working on this project, having to access two systems, the current new system, if we went with NORCOM, and inputting all data that would start brand new with case one, and then our historical data when we need to go back and look at how many calls were at this house, what was going on at this residence, and all the historical data, not to mention the current cases that are in our system right now, somehow getting into the new system. So it is a lot of work there that's going into it. In order to reduce expenses, I need to modify certain aspects of our radio usage. Essentially, any dispatch call that requires service intervention occurs a charge. So if officers handle certain tasks in an in-car MDT, then no charges may be incurred. While this approach may raise concerns about officer safety, we can address some of those issues. It would entail making adjustments to how our officers use the radio to avoid those charges. At LFP and Bothell, we've utilized the over-the-air radio for virtually everything an officer does. With NORCOM agencies, most cut costs by using the MDT to self-dispatch. So we're going to be exploring internal process to identify and implement measures that can decrease these expenses. I think the numbers that they gave us with the 90-100 incidents average is actually quite high. I think that there's a lot of things that the officers do that we keep track of that would be much minimized if we did it internally with computer-aided dispatch, self-dispatch. Just a really easy way to look at this is I get on the radio as an officer and I say, I'll be out at Albertsons on a business check. Now there's dispatch intervention and they're putting the call in. That's a billable call for service, that the way that NORCOM charges. And an officer could just get on the MDT and put themselves out at this at Albertsons doing a business check, and they get out and do their call. That's not billable because they did all that interaction. Where that comes into play, where I get a little frustrated, is it's an officer safety issue. I've got one officer at the station that hears an officer go out of Albertsons to do a walkthrough. And then I have them doing it on the computer and the officer in the station doesn't hear that. So where does everybody knows where everybody's at right now? So it's these kind of things that we would have to work through. And back in 2018, the concern we had with officer safety is officers would call out a traffic stop. And that's a billable call for service. The way NORCOM works now is if you do it over the MDT, you self-dispatch yourself on a traffic stop. Nobody hears this. Back then in 2018, they weren't doing anything and it was not charged, but nobody would know over the air. They have changed now to a system where you put yourself out on the computer system, dispatch then gets on and says, I see you're out at this location, and they don't make that a billable charge. So there's some processes that they've helped out with because of officer safety. So looking ahead to our current 23-24 budget, the cost breakdown for 23, for the fourth quarter of 23, the budget allocated to Bothell dispatch is $44,840, which remains unutilized at this moment because we haven't gotten the third quarter or fourth quarter. Specifically, $14,947 would be prorated for October of 2023. So we would still pay Bothell for that service in October of about $15,000. The remaining balance of the budget amounts to $29,893. So about $30,000 that is intended to cover for NORCOM services for dispatch purposes. And I confirmed this with their chief today. So starting November 1st and extending through December 31st, the end of the year, the city is set to compensate NORCOM with a payment of $71,665 for dispatch services. This payment leaves an additional sum of $41,772 that would require a budget adjustment to appropriately conclude 2023. The cost projection for 2024, as for 24, the existing dispatch budget stands at $180,000. The estimated cost for NORCOM services is $463,560. This results in a remaining $283,560, which necessitates a budget adjustment for 24. So this is a time-sensitive issue, as you all are aware. This is an emergency dispatch system. The contract with Bothell expires on October 18th. Bothell PD intends to start dispatch services with NORCOM on November 1st. So we will still be using Bothell dispatch from October 18th to November 1st. That's already taken care of. And I've confirmed that with the chief, the deputy chief, and their police manager that handles dispatch services. So even though the contract language says October 18th is the 180 days, we would still be using their services, which is only about 10 days later, 12 days later. So the city is asking for a motion to formally engage with NORCOM's board to use their services. Using NORCOM is the most prudent, financially responsible solution. So on August 11th, which is tomorrow, NORCOM will be having a board meeting, and we would like the board to vote for approval of engaging with Lake Forest Park. This is a formal letter of intent that the mayor signs, and we send to NORCOM prior to their board meeting tomorrow. We also have an initial ILA that we will begin working through once that's approved. This ILA will be brought to council at the next council meeting in September, I believe 14th. So Bothell PD will be transitioned to NORCOM on November 1st, and Lake Forest Park should begin that process now to plan for the same timeline. It is the intent with NORCOM that both LFP and Bothell PD are on the same radio channel. Bothell has been a great partner with us for the last 20 years, and we'd like to continue that relationship with police services using NORCOM and the continued relationship with Bothell and officer safety. So now I'll ask some any questions that you have.
Yes, Councilmember Lebo, Councilmember Riddle.
Thank you, Chief Harden. Terrific presentation, very thorough, and you outlined the alternatives very clearly.
Yeah.
It's sort of one of those things where if you just go from A, B, C, you automatically get to B. I'm totally understand and supportive of this as something that we need to do. You did mention this conversion effort and cost. Is there any sort of?
I have not gotten the cost with New World or Tyler Systems. And it's a complicated issue right now. I'm really focused on just making sure we have dispatch.
Sure.
They have a software product that they sell for data conversion, and we're trying to figure out how we can avoid that. This is all the things in the background to figure out how to save money. But they sell products, and we figure out ways to get around that.
And then just one quick follow-up. The estimate, I believe, for next year was about 463. And that's, do they true up the cost based upon the billable calls?
I don't know. And I think that's something that we'll take care of in the ILA.
Okay.
When we get to that point where we get language that our city attorney would say, hey, even though this is something that's estimated, can we have it built in where we're not seeing the call volume and billable calls for service? And how does that true up? Absolutely.
Okay, thank you. I'm supportive.
Councilmember Riddle.
Thank you. I have a nephew who's really good with computers. So the data that's on the Bothell server,
Mhm.
that would be the legacy data. they're keeping that server until we can figure out how to, and they can figure out how to get all the data. So there's no concern about that server being shut down or
No.
anything in it. Okay,
Nope.
fantastic.
It's going to be about processes. How does dispatch get it? There's a lot of things like the software can only be on one computer because of the IP and how it all works with connections. And you can't have two different versions of the same software running. It's all this stuff in the background. We're trying to figure out what's the best way, but our data is not going to go anywhere. And we've even looked at, I've talked to our IT about, do we build a software or a server here, get our data onto it so that it's preserved and then we can access it. So we're trying to figure out all of this stuff right now with many minds putting together.
I appreciate the concern because that data is critical for us moving forward, as you've stated before. And I'm disappointed that we're in this last minute rush. And I just think you really have it out for the Budget and Finance Committee tonight.
I know, right? Sorry.
I think it's more she has, it's out for Lindsay.
It's her birthday. How could you do this?
Sorry.
For
I
the record,
really
the
don't-
bow wave is next year.
Councilmember Goldman.
Yeah, thanks for the detailed presentation. I'm totally on board with going to NORCOM. I actually have some hesitancy about the cost savings about using the radio less, mainly because when we talked earlier about the department culture, and I would not want the department to get into a culture of cutting corners to save money.
Mhm.
And that I wouldn't want officers to feel that they can't use the radio or they shouldn't, when in actuality, that would be something that would help protect them and others. So I think we want to be very careful about how much money would this radio, I mean, do you have an estimate for how much money this?
No, I don't, but I do philosophy wise, completely on the same page as you. That's why you have me as your chief, and I'm going to have to make these decisions of even though we may have processes, officer safety is paramount. So if we're saying, hey, these are particular things that you cannot do on the radio anymore, and you need to do it on the computer. If an officer decides they're not going to because of an officer safety issue, then they don't get in trouble for it. It's because it's important for that. So you just got to have that culture that you talked about, and just how we're going to decide where are the, not cutting corners, but where are the most obvious ways that we don't need to get on the radio and create a billable call for service. So we'll definitely have that philosophy.
Okay. Deputy Mayor French.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Chief. Really fantastic presentation. I mean, it really, I'm broadly supportive of this. I would echo the sentiments of Councilmember Goldman that efficiency is one thing, cutting corners is another thing.
Exactly.
And the culture, as you described, I mean, I'm preaching to the choir here, and if it's a case of officer safety, $10,000, $20,000, $40,000 isn't worth it. So maybe we can find a way to buy calls in bulk at 10,000 per year or something.
Or
month,
crime goes away and we don't have any
Yeah.
calls.
Yeah, absolutely. I know, but I applaud you for your department's work on this, and I think it's incredibly challenging with the time frame given.
Yep.
So, it is a tough thing to swallow. $283,000 next year potentially, plus the migration over.
Mhm.
But forewarned is forearmed, and we'll figure it out. We'll get there, and the community has, as we all have, committed to making sure the department has the best resources possible. So we'll make
Thank
it
you.
happen.
Yes, Councilmember Castlever.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you very much, Chief, for the detail that you put into the presentation. It really has helped us to understand it very well. One question I have about the historical data that will be on the Bothell server is that it seems like both Bothell and Lake Forest Park are going to be in the same position when it
100%.
comes to getting the new data into the updated software. And I wondered if there may be cost savings working together to take care of that issue. And you probably already thought of that and talked to them, but I
Well,
just thought it worth raising.
Bothell and Lake Forest Park are on the same system, so we're on the same version. We have the same data. The only thing that separates us is a particular thing called an ORI, so that just separates our two cities. But the data is exactly the same, housed the same. So whatever solution we find. It's just migrating that data over. So working together is the plan.
It looks
Um,
good.
Yeah, but we've had one time frame was a year, then the other time was 3 to 5 years to convert. But then they said, well, if we didn't use this particular version of conversion software, maybe it's only 18 months. So it's still in the works. It's what it comes down to for officer safety is our dispatchers getting a call and being able to access that data so that our officers know what's going on. So
I totally understand it. And I have actually managed a big software conversion once, but way back in my
there's no
life.
headaches in that, right?
And all I can tell you is I never put in so many hours work a week as I did during that period. So good luck to all of you as you go through that. It's hard work.
We
and
may
we
look
appreciate
at there was a conversation about a contractor coming in and just doing data entry and taking all the stuff that's the most important, like warrants and officer safety alerts, some of the things that are really important, and having them entered into the new system immediately. So those are part of the conversations we've been thankfully part of.
Okay, excellent. Well, good luck and thank you.
Councilmember Piratoni. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and let me add my thanks to all my fellow council members for your work. And I just had a question, which is why did Bothell think that 5 months was going to be sufficient time to do this? Or please tell me that they're as panicked as our urgency here seems to be.
Totally, urgency is there.
Mhm.
I'm not going to get into the stuff behind the scenes of why this happened so much quicker. But they needed to, I mean, to be honest, Bothell's going to be saving a lot of money in this because they are not going to have the Bothell dispatch staff. So in their best interest, it's great. We've just been holding on with them for so long with a very good deal. And I went back to the first time that we partnered with them, and the costs are not a whole lot different from what we have today. So we've been a really good partner. In fact, I remember going to this last contract saying, hey, we need to up this like 6%, which it was like hard enough to say, let's do this. And now this happens. So
Anybody else before I call on Tom again? Dave? Deputy Mayor.
Just wanted to highlight something, Chief. You made a point, and I didn't want to miss this. The question of the transition or somebody calls 911.
Mhm.
Under the present system, it goes 911, Bothell tries, there's a handoff.
Yep.
And if it goes to EMS, there's additional time frame that
Yes.
occurs. And having it directly with NORCOM could save 30 seconds or more.
Oh, for sure.
Definitively. And one of the things that we've noted too in the past is that when you call 911, then they say what city then you get transferred to,
Yeah, off of your cell phone, but it's off of location.
Right.
So it's generally you're going to get this area when you're in this area somewhere else.
Sure.
State patrol or somebody else is going to have to reroute. They've done some changes over the last 10 years to be
Yeah.
better at that. But even the fire departments were a little irritated with even Bothell because Bothell's fire is through NORCOM. And so all of those 911 calls were going to Bothell dispatch and saying, what's your emergency? Explaining what it is. Okay, we're transferring you to NORCOM. NORCOM, what's your emergency? What's going
Right.
on?
Right.
And you get this delay. Now, if we switch that system, it's pretty much immediate, and that'll help out fire and EMT for sure. So.
and in full transparency, I think a lot of us in the community have called direct dispatch rather than 911. So
Yeah.
we don't have that additional routing.
Councilmember Riddle.
A comment, and then I would like to, we need a vote of approval for the mayor to move forward tomorrow.
Yes, I need the letter of intent to give NORCOM's board the official formal, acceptance. And then they vote, will they let us in to do the negotiating and contracts and that kind of stuff. So I need that tonight. So this is the first touch that we've had on this too.
So quick comment has NORCOM been interfacing with 988 yet? Or is that not really starting
Actually,
yet?
was at the Racer Operations Board meeting yesterday with the board, and NORCOM was a partner in that. They are not necessarily yet, but that is
In the
talks
plans.
of- Yep.
I would like to move to suspend the three-touch rule to move this letter forward tonight.
Second.
Second.
Thank you. And I would like to move to approve the mayor to sign the letter of
Point.
what?
You have to.
Oh, we have to vote.
Okay.
Now I'm
It's like-
doing it. This is usually the mayor's
the-
job to make
yeah.
it fast.
First off, all those in favor of removing the three-touch rule on the vote for the mayor to sign the dispatch services agreement, please say aye.
Aye.
Letter intent, I mean,
Okay.
okay, now you can go.
Now I will move approval for the mayor to sign the letter to move dispatch services from the city of Bothell to the Northeast King County Regional Public Safety Communications Agency, NORCOM.
Second.
Move in second. Any other discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of signing the letter of intent for moving the dispatch services to Northeast King County Regional Public Safety Communications Agency, please say aye.
Aye.
Ayes, pass unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank
You
you.
know, way back when I picked him to be chief was just for this night. I thought he kind of knew a little bit about computers and I knew he cared about his guys, so. I guess I got lucky on that one.
Thank you, Chief.
I told you that eight ball thing where you said yes or no worked out good for us. That time. All righty, I think we're up to council we're on to council committee reports.
Committees. Committee?
Okay, council. Okay, you're doing council committee report, council member reports.
Yes, please.
Okay,
Actually, I don't have one. I wanted to take a moment of personal privilege to give a shout out to our friends in Hawaii, particularly in the community of Lahaina, where I have some friends we've lost touch with. As you know, the death toll before this meeting started was over 60. Rumor from friends on the island looked like it's going to be in the hundreds by tomorrow morning. The entire community is gone. There's nothing left. It looks like a bomb hit it. And it's just absolutely devastating for a community that is so tight knit. And many of us have enjoyed visiting as guests of folks on the island there. So thoughts and prayers go out to those folks. And I hope that the folks that we don't hear from are well and sheltered. Because many of the folks, the cell service and 911 service went down and they sheltered in place and probably didn't make it. So we think about the wildfires here. What happened there was like a blast furnace and swept through so quickly there was no chance of survival if they hadn't gotten out already. I'll leave it there.
yes, I'm pretty sure you have something.
Well, I do, but it's going to be very short because it was seashore and it was exactly what we heard tonight from
There you go.
from Metro. So you all have heard it. I don't need to say anything more, right? Councilmember Goldman, can you think of anything else?
Nope.
Okay, thank you.
Same presentation?
Councilmember Firutani, you got something?
Yeah, I got something really quick from the K4C Outreach Committee. If any of, I think it's also members of the public or legislative bodies want to go on a tour of Cedar Hills, they're putting one together. So to contact me, I'm kind of stealing your thunder because it's all about solid waste again, but yeah, it'll be happening probably in September.
Thank you. Councilmember Riddle.
Briefly, the North King County Coalition on Homelessness met today, continuing to have discussions as to how that meeting will be formed and what we expect from KCRH to report out during those meetings. So we've sort of set the stage for some regular reporting. So I will probably be bringing that back to this body once we start seeing those reports in. I think right now, last month, they were able to report out that 500 individuals utilized services that listed one of the 5 cities of the North End cities as their last city of residence. And 39,000 total individuals across King County utilized services last month. So just to get some perspective of what we're facing up here. We still have our own problem that we need to take care of. And so I'm glad that we're part of this coalition and doing our part financially as well.
Anybody else? Seeing none? Okay, y'all know I was gone for quite a while. I was down in Utah, which was beautiful. I'm going to thank my city administrator for giving me some suggestions. I think he spent some time down there before, so that was good. A couple things I'm gonna mention. I'm gonna mention the officers who had to deal with that tragic accident where the young man died. I'm so glad I don't have to be the person that rolls up on that. It's kind of amazing. My second weekend, that girl got hit and I went to that funeral, but I'm pretty sure there wasn't one for this, but I would, well, we had a Latin festival on Saturday for those who didn't know that. And I guess it went real well. Battle of Bands turned out fantastic. It was won by a local kid from Lake Forest Park. And his mom happens to have Emmys and they want to put on I was talking to Corey today, they want to put on an event somehow to raise money for high school and college youth mental situation problems, which is awesome. I always say we have amazing people in Lake Forest Park. I agree with Tom. I'm a big Hawaii person, so that's brutal, but gotta be honest, folks, the world's really in a bad shape right now, all over the place. I'm glad you be thankful you live in Lake Forest Park and not on the East Coast or in Greece or anywhere else. So in Texas, don't talk bad about Texas. That's I don't. Now, you guys have a great week. Take care of yourselves. Thanks for getting everything done. Thank you, Chief. I appreciate it. Thank you, Lindsay, for all the hard work and figure out how to do that with all that. So have a lovely birthday.
To you. Happy birthday to you.
Happy birthday, dear
Lindsay.
happy birthday.
Birthday to you.
She said next year when she turns 35 that she's gonna have a big. Have a good night, folks.
You all. Thanks.